I haven't seen this in so long.
It's so good.
So good. So romantic. So
It's so
comedy.
romantic. I love it. This is one of the first movies I recommend to people who don't know they're old movie fans yet. I'm like, watch this. You'll become an old movie fan. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Quarantine Theater. We have an amazing cast here tonight. It only takes 4 people to read this amazing movie because it's so amazing. We have George Graham, Jeremy Weinreich, Karina Goshen, and Travis Sanders. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We are reading Robert Riskin and Frank Capra's classic, one of my all-time favorite films, the Best Picture winner of 1934, and I'm 34. It Happened One Night. All right, here we go. Fade In, Part 1, The Harbor at Miami Beach. Fade In provides quick views of yachts, ogoplanes, a luxurious shipcraft lying at the anchor in the calm, tranquil waters of tropical Florida. This dissolves to the nameplate on the side of a yacht reading Elspeth 2, and this is in turn to a yacht corridor where a steward is standing in front of a cabin door near a small collapsible table upon which there is a tray of steaming food. He lifts lids and examines the contents. A heavy-set sailor stands guard near the cabin door.
Fine. They ought to like this. Open the door.
Who's gonna take it into? You?
Oh, no. Molson, come on.
The view widens to include Mullison, a waiter. His eye is decorated with a shiner.
Not me, sir. She threw a ketchup bottle at me this morning.
Well, orders are orders. Somebody's got to take it in. Fredericks.
The view moves to another waiter who has a patch of bandage on his face.
Before I bring her another meal, I'll be put off the ship first.
Henry.
The view moves over to a Frenchman.
No, Miss Monsieur. When I leave this Ritz, you do not say I have to wait on crazy women.
The view moves back to include the steward and the others grouped around him.
My wife was an angel compared to this one, sir, and I walked out on her.
Come on, make up your mind.
A petty officer approaches. He is blustering and officious, but the type that is feeble and ineffective. His name is Lacey.
What's up? What's up?
There's a fairly close picture of the group featuring Lacey and the steward.
These pigs, they're afraid to take her food in.
That's ridiculous. Afraid of a mere girl? Why don't you do it yourself?
Why, I never thought about.
I never heard of such a thing. Afraid of a mere girl? I'll take it in myself.
They all stand around and watch him, much relieved. He picks up the tray and starts toward the door of the cabin.
Can't get a thing done unless you do it yourself. Open the door.
We see him at the cabin door as the guard quickly and gingerly unlocks it.
Afraid of a mere girl? Ridiculous.
Lacey stalks in bravely, the tray held majestically in front of him, while the steward and waiters form a circle around the door, waiting expectantly. There is a short pause, following which Lacey comes hurling out backwards and lands on his back, the tray of food scattering all over him. The steward quickly bangs the door shut and turns the key as the waiters stare silently. The scene dissolves to the main deck of the yacht, first affording a close view of a pair of well-shod masculine feet as they pace agitatedly back and forth. Then as the scene draws back, the possessor of the pacing feet is discovered to be Alexander Andrews, immaculately groomed in yachting clothes. In front of him stands a uniformed captain, but Andrews, brows wrinkled, deep in thought, continues his pacing.
On a hunger strike, huh? When'd she eat last?
She hasn't had a thing yesterday or today.
Been sending her meals in regularly?
Yes, sir. She refuses them all.
Why didn't you jam it down her throat?
It's not quite that simple. I've dealt with prisoners in my time, but this one...
Absurd! All this fuss over a snip of a girl. I'm going down to see her myself.
He leaves with determination, followed by the captain, and both are then seen walking in the direction of the cabin. Andrews grim.
This is dangerous business, Mr. Andrews. After all, kidnapping is no child's play.
Andrews ignores him and merely stares grimly forward. They arrive in front of the cabin door, where Lacey is brushing himself off and where a couple of waiters are picking up the last pieces of the broken dishes.
What's this? What's happened here?
She refused another meal, sir.
Get another tray ready. Bring it bring it to her at once. Open the door.
The guard unlocks the door and Andrews enters. Then we get a view of the cabin at the door. As Andrews enters and closes the door behind him, he looks around and his eyes light on his prisoner, following which the view swings over to Ellie, a beautiful girl in her early 20s. At the moment, she holds a small vase over her head, ready to heave it, and her eye flashes angrily. At the sight of her new visitor, however, she lowers the vase and sets it on a small table.
What do you want?
What's this about not eating?
I don't want to eat. And there's one more thing I don't want. Definitely not to see you.
Know what my next move is? No more cigarettes.
Why don't you put me in chains?
I might.
All right, put me in chains. Do anything you want. But I'm not going to eat a thing until you let me off this boat.
Come
She
on.
says petulantly out at the blue sky, but Andrews comes over and sits beside her.
Come on, Ellie. Stop being silly. You know I'm going to have my way.
I won't stand for it. I won't stand for you ruining my life. Why do you insist on it?
You ought to know why. Because
Yes, I know. Because I'm your daughter and you love me. Because you don't want me to make any mistakes. Because
marrying that fool King Wesley is
you're wasting your time. I'm already married to him.
not so far as I'm concerned, you're not. Yes.
The door opens and several waiters parade in with trays of steaming food.
How many times have I told you not to bring any food in here?
The
Wait a
waiters-
minute. Don't get excited. This isn't for you. Put it right here.
Ellie glares at her father and wanders over to the window seat, while the waiters occupy themselves setting the table. Andrews putters around the food, lifting the lids from which tempting aromas emanate. He shuts his eyes, murmuring oohs and ahs. A close-up of Ellie shows her, too, drinking in the inviting aromas, and for a moment she weakens. A close view of Andrews shows him glancing toward Ellie to see her reaction, whereupon Ellie's face, again appearing in close-up, freezes. Then Andrews and the waiters come into view.
Anything else, monsieur?
No, everything seems quite satisfactory. I may want some more of that delicious gravy. I'll ring.
Very good, monsieur.
Heavenly.
Ellie appears in the foreground with Andrews at the table in the background.
Smart, aren't you? So subtle.
If Gandhi had a chef like Paul, it would change the whole political situation in India.
You can't tempt me. Do you hear me? I won't eat.
Please. I can't fight on an empty stomach. Remember what Napoleon said?
I hope you're not comparing yourself to Napoleon. He was a strategist. Your idea of strategy is to use a lead pipe.
Andrews eats silently while Ellie rants at him, walking around and puffing vigorously on her cigarette.
Most humiliating thing ever happened to me. A bunch of gorillas shoving me in a car. The crowd outside of Justice of the Peace must have thought I was a criminal or something.
A close view of Andrews intercuts with parts of Ellie's speech. At the end of her speech, he smacks his lips, enjoying the food with too great a relish. Then the two are seen together.
Where are you taking me?
South America.
South America?
We leave Miami in an hour. Soon as we get some supplies aboard.
You'll have a corpse on your hands. That's what you'll have. I won't eat a thing while I'm on this boat.
In that event, we won't need so many supplies.
What do you expect to accomplish by all this? I'm already married.
I'll get it annulled.
You'll never do it. You can't do it.
I'll do it if it takes every penny I've got. I'll do it if I have to bribe that musical comedy Justice of the Peace. I'll do it if I have to prove that you were dragged in staggering drunk. You probably were. This filet mignon is divine.
What have you got against King Wesley?
Nothing much. I just think he's a fake, that's all.
You only met him once.
That was enough. Do you mind handing me the ketchup?
You talk as if he was a gigolo or something.
Never mind, I'll get it myself. Gigolo? Why, you took the word right out of my mouth. Thanks.
He's one of the best flyers in the country. Right now, he's planning a trip to Japan.
You're going to finance him, I suppose.
Why not? Oh, look what he's doing for aviation. It takes courage to do what he does. And character. At least he's accomplished something worthwhile. I suppose you'd like to have me marry a businessman. Well, I hate businessmen, particularly if you're a shining example.
He grins, not at all offended, knowing she doesn't mean it.
Your whole life is devoted to just one thing, to accumulate more money. At least there's romance in what he's doing.
He's no good, Ellie, and you know it. You married him only because I told you not to.
You've been telling me what not to do since I was old enough to remember. I'm sick of it.
And as Andrews ignores her, she starts moving around the table toward him. Next, she appears sitting on the edge of Andrews' chair, and she throws her arm around his shoulder.
Listen, Dad, let's not fight like this anymore. I know you're worried about me and want me to be happy, and I love you for it, but please try to understand. You're just a crazy impulse of mine. King and I talked about it a lot before we decided to get married. Look, why can't we give it a trial? Let's say for a year or so. If it's wrong, King and I will be the first to know it. We can get a divorce, can't we? Now, be a dear and let me off this boat. Keeping me twisted like this is so silly.
Andrews has been listening silently through the speech, giving no indication of his feelings in the matter.
You'll be set free when the marriage is annulled.
But to a close-up of Ellie, her eyes blazing angrily, shows her slowly edging away from her father, while he continues.
So there's no use being a stubborn idiot.
I come from a long line of stubborn idiots.
A time will come when you'll thank me for this.
I won't thank you. I'll never thank you.
Please don't shout.
I'll shout to my heart's content. I'll scream if I want to.
Ah! Coconut layer cake. Nice and gooey too, just the way I like it.
He's about to insert the first bite in his mouth when Ellie, her temper vanishing completely, overturns the small serving table, dumping its contents into her father's lap. The movement is so unexpected that Andrews, the fork still suspended near his mouth, stares at her stupefied. Then realizing what she has done, his eyes flash in anger. Dropping his fork, he rises and goes over to her while she stands facing him defiantly. Without a word of warning, he slaps her a stinging blow across the cheek. For a moment, she doesn't stir, her eyes widening in surprise and staring at him unbelievingly. Then, turning abruptly, she bolts out of the door. Andrews remains motionless, his eyes shutting painfully. It is the first time he has struck her, and it hurts.
Ellie! Next on the deck, at the open cabin door. Oh.
Andrews is seen staring off at something, and an amazed, frightening look comes into his eyes. Then, as viewed from his position at the cabin door, Ellie appears to be standing on the rail, and with a professional dive, she leaps into the water. A full view of the deck reveals the crew and the officers scurrying around, several of them shouting, "Somebody overboard!"
It's my daughter, go after her! Lower the boats.
Captain.
Lower the boats!
General excitement reigns. Several of the crew dive into the water. Others release the boat lines. Following this, Ellie is seen swimming furiously against the giant waves. Next, she appears as a small speck in the distance, while half a dozen of the crew are swimming in pursuit. At the side of the yacht, one of the boats has already been lowered, and two men jump in and grab the oars. The men seem to be gaining on Ellie. In the distance, several small motorboats are anchored, and over the sides of the boat, their owners are fishing. Ellie seems to be headed in their direction. One of the motorboats appears closer. A middle-aged man sits on the stern, holding lazily to his line, his feet dangling in the water as the boat is tossed around by the turbulent waves. Ellie is then again seen swimming. She looks back, and the next scene shows the men rowing toward her and gaining on her. Thereupon we see Ellie ducking under the water. The middle-aged fisherman is suddenly startled by Ellie's face, which appears from under the water, right between his legs. Ellie puts her finger up to her lips, warning him to shush, and he is too dumbfounded to say anything. As the pursuing boats come near, Ellie ducks under the water again, and the boats scoot right by the fisherman. Then Ellie's head bops up, she peers ahead of her, and seeing that her pursuers have passed her, she smiles victoriously.
Thanks.
Ellie begins swimming ashore. The scene dissolves to the deck of the yacht as Ellie's pursuers clamber aboard. Andrews is waiting for them.
Sorry, sir, she got away.
Of course she got away. Too smart for you.
What a hellcat, no controlling these modern girls. They're terrible.
Terrible. Nothing terrible about her. She's great, marvelous youngster. Got a mind of her own, knows just what she wants. She's not going to get it, though. She won't get very far. She has no money.
What about that diamond wrist catch she had on? She can raise some money on that.
Holy smoke, I forgot about that. Send a wireless at once. Lovington Detective Agency. Daughter escaped again. Watch all roads, all transports, and railroad stations in Miami. Have your New York office keep tabs on King Wesley. Intercept all messages. I want her back at all costs.
Yes, sir.
The view draws in to afford a close-up of Andrews staring out to sea, his face wreathed in a broad smile. Then this fades out. The railroad station of an active terminal in Miami fades in. The view moves down to the entrance gate to the trains. Passengers hurrying through it, then picks out two men, obviously detectives who have their eyes peeled on everyone. Passing through, then the view affords a glimpse of Ellie, who stands watching the detectives, this scene wiping off. We see an air transport with several planes tuning up in the background. As passengers file through, several detectives stand around in a watchful pose. This scene wiping off the front of a Western Union office comes into view. Several people walk in and out. At the side of the door, two detectives are on the lookout. This scene also wipes off, revealing the waiting room of a bus station. Over the ticket window, there is a sign reading, "Buy bus tickets here," and a line forms in front of it. Here, too, there are two detectives.
We were wasting our time. Can you picture Ellie Andrews riding on a bus?
I told the old man it was the bunk.
The view moves from them to Ellie, who stands behind a post and is watching the two detectives apprehensively. As the two, viewed from her position, stand by the ticket window, one of them turns toward her. Thereupon we see her slipping behind the post, concealing herself. Just then, a little old lady approaches her.
Here's your ticket, ma'am.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
When does this bus leave?
About 15 minutes.
Thank you.
She picks up a small overnight bag from the floor and hurries away. She crosses to the entrance of the waiting room and disappears through the doors. The view then wings over to a telephone booth near the entrance. Clustered around the booth are half a dozen men of varied appearance. The inside of the booth is lighted, and a young man, Peter Warren, waves his hands wildly as he shouts into the phone, although it is impossible to hear what he is saying. A close inspection of the men surrounding the booth, the scene contracting to a close view, reveals them as being slightly and happily intoxicated. A short man approaches the door of the booth.
Hey,
No. No. You go. Oh, okay. Hey, what's going on here? I'd like to use that phone.
shh, quiet. This is history in the making.
What?
There's a man biting a dog in there.
Atta boy, Petey, old boy, atta boy.
I'm not going to stand for this any longer. In a pig's eye, you will.
Is that so? That's telling him, Petey, old boy.
You listen to me, monkey face. When you fired me, you fired the best news hound your filthy scandals she'd ever had.
And the scene cuts to a New York newspaper office where the night editor, Gordon, his sleeves rolled up, sits at his desk shrieking into the phone.
Say, listen, you wouldn't know a story if it reached up and kicked you in the pants. Yeah? Sure. I got your copy. Why didn't you tell me you were going to write in Greek? I'd start a new department.
That was free verse, you gas house palooka.
Free verse, huh? What the dickens was free about it? It costs this paper a gop of dough. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not going to cost us any more.
Well, that's okay by me, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm through with newspapers. See? I'm through with stupidity. I'll never write another newspaper story for you or anybody else if I have to starve. Well, yeah, what about my novel? When I get through with that,
Well, you got through with that. I'll have a beard down to my ankles.
Mr. Gordon?
Huh?
Did you know he reversed the charges on that call?
What? Say, listen, you. When you get back to New York, take my advice and stay far away from this office unless you don't care what happens to that funny map of yours.
In the phone booth, Peter reacts to the phone being hung up on him, but he goes right on for the benefit of the boys.
Oh, so you're changing your tune, eh? Well, it's about time. But it's gonna do you no good, my tough friend. It's a little too late for apologies. I wouldn't go back to work for you if you begged me on your hands and knees. I hope this is a lesson to you.
He snaps up the receiver with a great pretense of outraged pride, following which the view expands to include his public.
Attaboy, Peter. That's telling him, Peter. Huh?
The gang is full of admiration for the courageous way he talked to the boss as Peter staggers out of the booth.
Give me any of his lip, Willie. Ha! I guess he knows now what I think of his job. Is my chariot ready?
Your chariot awaiteth without its almighty king.
Make way for the king. Long live the king. Make way.
With head held high, he struts majestically out of sight, followed by his admirers, following which the scene dissolves to the bus station. His inebriated admirers stand around the entrance to a bus, while Peter stands on the steps, his suitcases in hand.
That's right, my friends. Cling to your jobs. Remain slaves the rest of your lives. Scum of the earth, newspaper men. Not me. When I'm basking in the glorious arms of the muse, what'll you be doing? Chasing news, you miserable worms? For what? A mere pittance. My heart goes out to you. Goodbye.
Goodbye, O mighty king. Peace be with you, courageous one.
All aboard, Philadelphia, New York. All aboard.
Look out. Get back. Farewell. Farewell.
Scram.
The scene cuts to the interior of the bus as viewed from the front. The view moving forward, passing the conglomerate of unprepossessing human beings who occupy the seats. Every space is taken, and the occupants seem hot and uncomfortable. Yep. Which adds to their uninviting appearance. Mothers cling to crying babies. A Swedish farmhand and his young wife are already busy opening their basket of food prepared for the long journey. A surly-looking hoodlum traveling alone is slumped into his seat, his cap drawn carelessly over his eyes. The moving view passes these and other characters until it reaches one unoccupied seat in the car, unoccupied except for several bundles of newspapers. Standing before the seat is Peter, his suitcase in his hand, speculating as to what disposition to make of the newspapers.
Hey, driver, how about clearing this stuff away?
Several passengers crane their necks to scrutinize the intruder. Through a glass partition, the driver can be seen receiving his last-minute instructions from the superintendent, who stands on the running board. Their voices undistinguishable. In answer to Peter's request, the driver glances back indifferently and continues talking to the superintendent. A close view of Peter shows him arching his eyebrows, an amused acknowledgement of the disdainful attitude of the driver. He drops his suitcase and starts forward. Then we see him arriving at the glass partition, and Peter taps playfully on the pane with his fingernails, whereupon the driver turns and pulls the window down a few inches.
What do you want?
If you'll be good enough to remove those newspapers, I'll have a seat.
Okay. Keep your shirt on, young fella.
Just between you and me, I never intended taking it off.
He wheels around uncertainly and swaggers jauntily down the aisle toward the empty seat. En route, he bestows a genial smiles upon several of his disgruntled fellow passengers, and stops in front of a robust lady who, at the moment, is breastfeeding her baby, while a lighted cigarette dangles from her lips.
Personally, I was raised on a bottle. When I was a baby, I insisted on it. You know why? I never liked the idea of getting cigarette ashes in my eyes.
He moves forward, leaving the woman unable to make head or tails of it. And assuming that he's crazy, she shrugs her shoulders and turns her attention to the baby. Now Peter arrives at his seat and, whistling softly, raises the window. Unhurriedly, he picks the newspaper bundles up one by one and flings them out of the window. They hit the sidewalk below with a dull thud. Thereupon, a close view of the driver shows him reacting violently to Peter's unprecedented cheek and starting down from his seat. Peter has now cleared the seat and all the newspaper bundles and still whistles his favorite melody. He picks up his suitcase preparatory to placing it in the rack overhead. At this point, the driver enters the side door of the bus.
Hey, wait a minute.
Peter's arms are holding his suitcase overhead, and turning, he glances at the driver and quizzically looks in his eyes.
What do you think you're doing?
Huh?
The papers! The papers! What do you mean throwing them out?
Oh, the papers.
He lowers his arms and deposits the suitcases on the floor.
Oh, that's a long story, my friend. You see, I don't like sitting on newspapers. I did once, and all the headlines came off of my white pants.
Hey, what are you trying to do? Kid me?
Oh, I wouldn't kid you. On the level, it actually happened. Nobody bought a paper that day. They followed me all over town and read the news from the seat of my pants.
What are you gonna do about the papers? Somebody's gotta pick them up.
Okay with me, I'm not arguing.
Fresh guy, huh? What do you need is a good sock on the nose.
You look here, partner. You may not like my nose, but I do. It's a good nose, the only one I've got. I always keep it out in the open where anybody can take a sock at it. If you decide to do it, make sure you don't miss.
During his speech, Ellie enters from the rear and plucks herself into Peter's seat. Unseen by Peter, she places her small bag beside her.
Oh, yeah?
Now that's a brilliant answer. Why didn't I think of it? Our conversation could have been over long ago.
Oh, yeah?
You win.
Smiling, he turns to sit down, but the smile dies on his face when he finds his place occupied by Ellie, who stares out the window.
Excuse me, lady, but that upon which you sit is mine.
I beg your pardon.
Now listen, I'm in a very ugly mood. I put up a stiff battle for that seat, so if it's just the same to you, scram.
Driver,
The driver has stopped to witness this altercation.
are those seats reserved?
Nope. First come, first served.
Thank you.
Driver,
Oh, yeah?
these seats accommodate 2 passengers, don't they?
Maybe they do. Maybe they don't.
Peter lifts Ellie's overnight bag off the seat and drops it on the floor. Part of her coat covers the small space by her side. This he sweeps across her lap.
Move over, lady. This is maybe they do.
He plops into the seat, the other passengers around them heaving a sigh of relief. Ellie flashes him a devastating look and deliberately turns her back on him. But Peter suddenly looks down toward the floor, following which a close-up at their feet reveals that Ellie's bag on the floor annoys Peter. With his foot, he slowly moves it over to her, and Ellie's foot is seen pushing it back. Whereupon Peter viciously kicks it over to her side again. Next, we see Ellie glaring at him, picking up her bag and standing on the seat, depositing it on the rack overhead. But just then, the bus starts forward with a launch, which unbalances her, and she falls backward right into Peter's lap. Their noses almost touch. Their eyes meet, and they glare at each other hostilely. Ellie quickly scrambles off and gets back in her seat, turning her back on him.
Well, next time you drop in, bring your folks.
This dissolves to a country road. The bus sways perilously as it speeds through the night, following which the view dissolves to the interior of the bus, revealing Peter slumped in his seat, his hat down over his eyes. Ellie has her head thrown back, trying to sleep. But the swaying bus causes her head to roll from side to side uncomfortably, and finally she gives up.
Tell that man not to drive so fast.
Are you talking to me?
Yes. Tell that man to drive slowly.
Okay.
Much to her surprise, he sighs deeply and relaxes to his former positions, shutting his eyes. She glares at him crushingly. The scene dissolves to another view of the bus, disclosing the driver, and suddenly the bus comes to a stop.
Rest station, 10 minutes.
The view draws back as some of the passengers rise. The men stretch their legs, the women straighten out their skirts. A close view of Peter and Ellie then shows her rising. Peter accommodatingly shoves his feet aside for her to pass. And Ellie starts up the aisle, but she suddenly stops, looks back, first at her bag and then at Peter, decides to take her bag with her, and returns to take it. She reaches for it on the rack, Peter watching her amused. The scene dissolves to the outside of the rest station, with several passengers walking briskly back and forth. The place is dimly lit by 1 or 2 lampposts, and Peter can be seen leaning against one of these posts, smoking a cigarette. The scene moving in, a close view of Peter shows him stealing a glance in the direction of Ellie, and a view from his angle reveals Ellie in the shadow of the bus. Her bag at her feet, she slowly turns her head toward Peter and then quickly averts it. Peter speculates about her. He glances around the place. The scene moves about, following his gaze. It takes in the other passengers, all obviously poor and uncultured. The moving view reaches Ellie. The contrast is perceptible. Thereupon, we see Peter reacting with comprehension. No doubt about it. She doesn't belong with these passengers. Then suddenly, he sees something which startles him. We see what it is. Directly in back of her, the young hoodlum passenger slyly lifts her overnight bag from the ground and starts running with it. Ellie is oblivious of his actions. Peter springs forward. Ellie sees Peter coming toward her and is perceptibly startled, but Peter whizzes by her, and this amazes her even more. She shrugs her shoulders, perplexed, and resumes her smoking. In a few seconds, Peter returns, puffing breathlessly.
He got away. I suddenly found myself in the middle of the brush and not a sign of the skunk.
I don't know what you're raving about, young man, and furthermore, I'm not interested.
Wow, of all the... Well, maybe you'll be interested to know your bag's gone.
Oh, my heavens, it's gone!
Yeah, I knew you'd catch on eventually.
What happened?
That cadaverous-looking yegg who sat in front of us just up and took it. Boy, how that baby can run.
What am I gonna do now?
Don't tell me your ticket was in it.
No, I've got that all right, but my money, all I have here is $4. I've got to get to New York with it.
You can wire home for some money when we get to Jacksonville.
What? Yes, I guess I will.
I'll report it to the driver about your bag, I mean.
No, I'd rather you didn't.
Don't be a fool. You lost your bag, the company will make good. What's your name?
I don't want it reported.
Why, that's ridiculous. They're responsible for everything that...
See here, can you understand English? I don't want it reported. Please stay out of my affairs. I want to be left alone.
You ungrateful brat.
The scene dissolves to the bus, where all the passengers are scattering back to their seats. Peter is already seated when Ellie arrives. A close view then shows her standing uncertainly for a moment, speculating whether to cross over his legs to get her place by the window. Peter feels her presence by his side and glances up. She tosses her head and plants herself in the seat in front of him, vacated by the young man who stole her bag. Peter takes the affront with a shrug and slides over gratefully to the coveted spot near the window. The scene dissolves to a close view of Ellie and a recently arrived fat man next to her. She has her head thrown back in an effort to sleep, but the fat man, his hands clasped over his protruding stomach, snores disgruntlingly, and the rumble of the flying bus accompanies him. Suddenly, the bus careens, and the fat man falls against Ellie, and she awakens with a start and pushes him back. The fat man's snoring goes on uninterrupted, and Ellie relaxes again. But in a few seconds, the procedure is repeated, and Ellie is beside herself. She looks around for somewhere to flee. Peter, seated in the back of her in his customary slumped position, opens his eyes slightly. It is apparent he has been watching her for some time, for he grins at her discomfiture. Ellie's head turns in his direction, and the grin leaves Peter's face. He shuts his eyes and pretends to be asleep. Ellie glances at Peter to make certain he is asleep. The fat man falls against her again, and it is all she can stand. She starts to rise. Peter sees her coming and deliberately puts his hand over the next seat to him, still pretending to be asleep. Just as Ellie starts to sit, she notices his hand and is embarrassed. Gingerly, she picks up his limp hand and places it on his knee. She then slides into the seat, sighing with relief, whereupon Peter opens his eyes and is amused. Slowly his head turns and he scrutinizes her soberly and appraisingly. Ellie slowly turns her head for a glimpse of Peter and is startled to find him gazing at her. She turns forward, her jaw set forbiddingly. The scene dissolves to the view of a road. It is dawn, and in the distance, against the horizon, the bus, a mere speck, makes its lone way over the deserted country. This dissolves to a large sign reading Jacksonville, and then into the bus, affording a close view of Ellie and Peter. They are both asleep, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder, Peter's top coat thrown over her. Then the view draws back. The bus is empty except for Ellie and Peter. The last few passengers are leaving. Peter's eyes slowly open. He looks down at the head on his shoulder and grins. With a sigh, he shuts his eyes again and resumes his slumber. Next at the front of the bus, the driver stands staring at Peter and Ellie in this intimate position, and his mouth twists knowingly.
Oh, yeah?
Ellie stirs, squirms, and a little bit uncomfortably, with a sleepy grunt, shifts her position. Just as she settles down, her eyes open. She stares out of the window with unseeing eyes and then closes them, dreamily giving the impression that, still half conscious, she is trying to recall where she is. Apparently she does, for her eyes suddenly snap open and she lifts her head. Finally, in a scene including Peter, Ellie realizes that she has been sleeping on his shoulder, whereupon she straightens up, embarrassed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, silly, isn't it? Everybody's gone.
She lifts her arm to adjust her hat and becomes conscious of his coat over her, which slips. She stares at it thoughtfully for a moment, then at Peter.
Oh, thank you. We're in Jacksonville, aren't we?
Yes.
That was foolish of me. Why didn't you shove me away?
Hated to wake you up. How about some breakfast?
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Most uncomfortably, she edges away from him toward the front of the bus, Peter watching her leave, his interest definitely provoked. The scene cuts to the stand as Ellie emerges from the bus. At the foot of the steps is the driver.
How much time have I?
About half hour.
I'm over to the Windsor Hotel.
Peter's in the door of the bus in the background, and a close view then shows him stopping to listen as he sees Ellie talking to the driver.
The Windsor? You'll never make it in time.
We have to wait for me.
Wait for you. Why?
Yeah. Yes, I may be a few minutes late.
She disappears from sight, leaving the driver staring at her dumbly, and Peter, standing in back of the driver, shakes his head in amazement. The scene dissolves to the bus stand later that morning, the same spot where the bus had previously been. It is no longer there, however. A huge crowd fills the space, and the view moving down through the crowd singles Ellie out. She has just arrived and looks around helplessly. Finally, she spots a uniformed terminal guard and approaches him.
Where's the bus to New York?
Left 20 minutes ago.
That's ridiculous. I was on that bus. I told him to wait.
Sorry, miss. It's gone. Ah, I see what it's doing there.
Oh.
Uh-huh. Actually, that's scene description, so that's actually it for my line.
Good morning.
Peter is in the foreground. The guard is seen in the background, and Ellie stares at Peter, perplexed.
Remember me? I'm the fellow you slept on last night.
Seems to me I've already thanked you for that. What time is the next bus to New York?
8 o'clock tonight.
8 o'clock? But that's 12 hours.
Sorry, miss.
Oh, what's the matter? Wouldn't the old meanies wait for you? Say, how old are you anyway? Don't you know these buses work on a schedule? You need a guardian.
What are you excited about? You missed the bus too?
Yeah, I missed it too.
There's a close view of the two. She turns to him. Her interest is provoked by his tone of voice. She glances up into his face.
Don't tell me you did it on my account. Hope you're not getting ideas that what happened last night is... You need to concern yourself about me, young man. I can take care of myself.
You're doing a pretty sloppy job of it. Here's your ticket.
My ticket?
I found it on the seat.
Oh, thank you. Must have fallen out of my pocket.
You'll never get away with it, Miss Andrews.
What are you talking about?
Just a spoiled brat of a rich man. You and Wesley will make an ideal team.
Will you please tell me what you're raving about?
You'll never get away with it, Miss Andrews. Your father will stop you before you get halfway to New York.
You mustn't have me confused with...
Oh, quit kidding. It's all over the front pages, you know. I've always been curious about the kind of a girl that would marry King Wesley.
He pulls a newspaper out of his pocket and hands it to her. Ellie glances at the headline hurriedly.
Take my advice. Grab the first bus back to Miami. That guy's a phony.
I didn't ask for your advice.
That's right, you didn't.
You're not going to notify my father, are you?
What for?
If you pay your cards, why, you might get some money out of it.
I never thought of that.
Listen, if you promise not to do it, I'll pay you. I'll pay you as much as he will. You won't gain anything by giving me away as long as I'm willing to make it worth your while. I've got to New York without being stopped. It's terribly important to me. I'll pay it now. The only thing is I had when I jumped off the yacht was my wristwatch, and I had to pawn that to get these clothes. I'll give you my address, and you can get in touch with me in a minute we get to New York.
Never mind. You know, I had you pegged right from the start. You're the spoiled brat of a rich father. The only way you can get anything is to buy it. Now you're in a jam and all you can think of is your money. Never fails, does it? Ever hear the word humility? No, you wouldn't. I guess it never occurred to you to just say, please, mister, I'm in trouble. Will you help me? No, that'd bring you down off your high horse for a minute. Let me tell you something. Maybe you take a load off your mind. You don't have to worry about me. I'm not interested in your money or your problems. You, King Wesley, your father, you're all a lot of hooey to me.
He turns his back on her and leaves. A close-up of Ellie shows her staring after him, her eyes blazing angrily. In a telegraph office, Peter addresses a girl operator as he drops a telegram on the counter, which she reads.
You send telegrams here?
I'm just fine, thanks. And how are you? All right. To Joe Gordon, care of New York, mail, New York. Am I laughing? The biggest scoop of the year just dropped in my lap. I know where Ellen Andrews is. No. Do you really?
Go on, send the telegram.
How would you like to have the story, you big tub of
Mush.
tub of mush? Well, try and get it. What I said about never writing another line for you still goes. Are you burning? Peter Warren. Well, that'll be $2.60.
Send it collect.
Collect?
Collect.
As the clerk takes the wire from him, the scene fades out. Part 3. The bus terminal fades in. It is night now, and the rain comes down in torrents. People scurry around to get into the buses as the voice of an announcer is heard.
Bus for blah, 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 Charleston, blah, 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 and all points north to New York.
Dissolved to the interior of the bus, which is practically filled, Peter is in his seat reading a magazine, while Ellie enters hurriedly from the rear door and starts forward. As she approaches Peter, she hesitates a second and deliberately passes him, plunking herself into a seat in the opposite aisle. Peter turns just as she gets seated. He glances at her indifferently. A close view shows Ellie seated next to a man who sits reading a newspaper which covers his face. Her eyes are fixed forward, her lips set adamantly. A close-up of the man next to Ellie makes it plain that he is a typical drummer. At the moment, he is absorbed in a serial story, but suddenly he becomes aware of something at his feet, and without lowering the newspaper, his gaze slowly shifts downward. At this, the view moves down until it reaches Ellie's trim ankles. Her feet beat a regular tattoo on the floor. Her extreme agitation is evident. The view moves back slowly, taking in Ellie's shapely leg as far as the knee. Then we see Ellie and the drummer as his gaze is still fixed on her leg. Slowly, his face breaks into a lavish grin. He lowers his paper and turns for a scrutiny of her face. What he sees apparently delights him, for he drops his paper completely and smiles broadly.
Hi, sister, all alone. My name is Shapely. Might as well get acquainted. It's going to be a long trip. It gets tiresome later on, especially for someone like you. You look like you got class. Yes, sir, with a capital K, and I'm a guy that knows class when he sees it. Believe you me.
Close-up of Ellie as Shapley's voice continues and shows her glancing back at Peter, expecting him to come to her rescue.
Ask any of the boys, they'll tell you Shapely sure knows how to pick 'em. Yes, sir, Shapely is the name, and that's the way I like 'em.
Ellie again looks toward Peter, but Peter seems to have found something of unusual interest in his magazine, and we again see the harassed Ellie and the irrepressible Shapely, who continues.
You made no mistake sitting next to me. Just between us, the kind of mugs you meet on a hop like this ain't nothing to write home to the wife about. You got to be awful careful who you hit up with, is what I always say, and you can You can't be too particular, neither. Once, when I was coming through North Carolina, I got to grabbing with a good-looking mama, one of those young ones, and plenty classy too. Kind of struck my fancy. You know how it is. Well, sir, you could have knocked me over with a Mack truck. I was just warming up when she yanked off the bus. Where do you think she was, huh? Might as well give up the girl, bandit. The one the paper's been writing. Yes, sir, you could have knocked me over with a Mack truck. What's the matter, sister? You ain't saying much?
It seems to me you're doing excellently without any assistance.
That's pretty good. Well, shut my big, nasty mouth.
Close-up shows Ellie enduring more of this as Shapley's voice continues.
Looks like you're one up on me. Nothing like I better than to meet a high-class mama that can snap 'em back to you, because the colder they are, the hotter they get, is what I always say. Take this last town I was in. I was running to a damn note a bad looker either, but boy, was she an iceberg. Every time I opened my kisser, she pulls a 10 strike on me. It sure looked like a cold turkey for one man, Shapely. I sell office supplies, see, and this hutsy-totsy lazy, the damper on me quick. She don't see a thing, and if she did, she wouldn't buy it from a fresh mug like me. Well, says I go to myself, Shapely, you better go to work. You're up against a Lulu. Well, I'm here to tell you, sister, I opened up a line of fast chatter that had that damn spin like a Russian dancer before I got through. She bought enough stuff to last the firm a year, and she did put an act when I blew town. Yes, sir. When a cold mama gets a hot boy, when she fizzles, she kind of cramped my style, though I didn't look at a damn dame for 3 towns. Not that I couldn't. For me, it's always a kitsch. I got much better chance than the local talent. You see, they're kind of leery about the local talent, too close to know home. Know what I mean?
Ellie has reached the point where she could, without any compunction, strangle him.
But take a bird like me. It's here today and gone tomorrow, and what happens is nobody's business.
By this time, she turns helplessly toward Peter, but we see Peter being deliberately oblivious of her presence, following which the three are seen, with Peter in the background.
But I don't go in for that kind of stuff much. I like to pick my fillies. Take you, for instance. You're my type. No kidding, sister. I could go for you in a big way. Fun on the side, Shapely. They call me on the accent is on the fun side. Believe you me.
Believe you me, you bore me to distraction.
Well, you're 2 on me now.
Hey, you.
Shapley's laugh dies down. He looks dumbly up at Peter, whose 2 fingers are still held in midair.
Huh?
There's a seat over there for you.
What's the idea?
I'd like to sit with my wife, if you don't mind.
Wife?
Yeah, come on.
Oh, excuse me. I was just trying, to make things pleasant.
Smiling sheepishly, he sidles over to Peter's seat, his 2 fingers still poised in the air. Peter plants himself next to Ellie and totally ignores her, opens his magazine and resumes his reading. Then Ellie and Peter are seen close together. She looks up at him.
If you promise not to snap my head off, I'd like to thank you.
Forget it. I didn't do it for you. His voice got on my nerves.
She feels herself crushed and ventures no further comment as Peter resumes his interest in his magazine. A full view of the bus follows, and there is silence for a while as the bus slows down and comes to a stop. Almost simultaneously, a boy makes his appearance selling magazines and candy.
Here you are, folks. Candy, popcorn, cigarettes, magazines.
Here, boy.
What'd you do? Wire one of your friends for money?
No, it'll be useless. Father get the wire before they would.
Yes, ma'am.
Box of chocolates, please.
Never mind, son. She doesn't want it.
But the lady says.
Of course I do. What do you mean?
Beat it.
You have your nerve. Here, boy.
Peter snatches the purse out of her hand and takes the money out. Ellie stares at him dumbfounded.
$1.60. You had $4 last night. How do you expect to get to New York at the rate you're going?
That's none of your business.
You're on a budget from now on.
He flings her purse back at her and pockets the money.
Now, just a minute. You can't.
Shut up.
He returns to his magazine, leaving her staring at him petulantly as the scene fades out. Somewhere on the road later that night, there is apparently on the outskirts of a town, 2 local policemen and our bus driver stand in the foreground near a police booth. The rain sweeps across their faces as they talk. The passengers in the bus, which stands in the background, stick their heads out, trying to hear what is going on. The first policeman speaks to the second policeman.
You won't be able to pass till morning.
Not even then if this keeps up.
Peter approaches the group and is then seen with the officers and the driver.
What's up?
Bridge washed out around Dawson.
Looks like we can't go through till morning. Not even then if this keeps up.
Any of your passengers want a place to sleep? There's an auto camp up yonder a pace.
Yeah, where?
Up yonder. See lights? See the lights?
Yeah.
That's it. Auto camp.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, auto camp.
He dashes toward the bus. Then he appears at the side door of the bus.
Hey, Brett.
The view moves to the rear door of the bus. Ellie is standing at the bottom step.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, come on, we're stopping here for the night.
He disappears inside the bus through the side door with an independent toss of her head. Ellie turns and also enters the bus, but through the rear door. The scene dissolves to the Dykes Auto Camp. Ellie stands alone on the porch of a small bungalow, sheltered from the rain. Over her head is a sign reading, Office Dyke Auto Co-PD Dyke Prop. She looks about her restlessly, giving the impression that she has been waiting for someone. Suddenly, she is attracted by something and gazes in its direction. Then, as seen by Ellie in a long view, there appears about 20 yards away a small cabin, lighted on the inside, and from it Peter emerges, accompanied by a man, presumably Mr. Dyke. We cannot hear what is being said from their movements, however. It is apparent that an exchange of money is taking place. Dyke waves his hand in departure and starts toward Ellie. At the same time, Peter calls to her.
Hey, come on, we're all set.
Ellie hesitates and starts towards the cabin. She's hurrying across the open space. En route, she passes Mr. Dyke. Mr. Dyke greets Ellie.
Good evening. Hope you and your husband rest comfortably.
Ellie keeps running, but suddenly she stops dead and looks back at Mr. Dyke, following which a close-up of Ellie shows her eyes opening wide with astonishment. Her impulse is to call Mr. Dyke back to make him repeat what he said, to make certain she heard him correctly. But Dyke is gone, and she turns and glances thoughtfully in the direction of the cabin. Then slowly the corners of her mouth screw up in an attitude of cynicism. So that's it, is it? He has given her no previous evidence of being on the make. Yet now, with the first opportunity, her thoughts, however, are interrupted by Peter's voice.
Well, Brett, what do you say?
She doesn't stir. There appears a close-up view of Peter standing in the doorway of the cabin, looking toward Ellie.
Come on. What are you going to do, stand there all night?
Ellie is lost in speculation as to proceed. Then, tossing her head defiantly with her lips grimly, she starts toward the cabin unless she reaches it, stops in the doorway and peers in. As she does this, there is a view of the inside of the cabin as seen by her at the door. Except for two cots on either side of the room, a few sticks of cane furniture, a small table upon which stands an oil burner for cooking, the place is barren. At the moment, Peter is attaching a clothesline across the center of the room. His suitcase is already open, and now Ellie steps inside, surveying the place contemptuously. But Peter, with his back to her, is oblivious of her presence. And as he works, he hums his favorite melody. Ellie finally breaks the silence.
Darn clever those Armenians.
Yeah, it's a gift.
I just had the unpleasant sensation of hearing you referred to as my husband.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I registered as Mr. and Mrs.
Oh, you did. What am I expected to leap for joy?
I kind of half expected you to thank me.
Your ego is colossal.
Yeah, not bad. How's yours?
There's a silence for a moment, and Peter proceeds with the unpacking of his suitcase. And as she watches him, Ellie's mood changes from one of anger to that of sarcasm.
Compared to you, my friend, Shapely's an amateur. Whatever gave you an idea you can get away with this? You're positively the most conceited.
Hey, wait a minute. Let's get something straightened out right now. If you have any peculiar ideas that I'm interested in, you forget it. You're just a headline to me.
A headline? You're not a newspaper man, are you?
Chalk one up for your side. Now listen, you want to get to King Wesley, don't you? All right, I'm here to help you. What I want is your story, exclusive, a day-to-day account, all about your mad flight to happiness. I need that story. Just between you and me, I've got to have it.
Now, isn't that just too cute? There's a brain behind that face of yours, isn't there? You got everything nicely figured out for yourself, including this.
This? Oh, that's a matter of simple mathematics. These cabins cost $2 a night, and I'm very sorry to inform you, wifey dear, that the family purse won't stand for our having separate establishments.
Well, thank you very much, but you've been very kind.
Oh yeah, it's all right with me, going out in the storm, but I'm gonna follow you, see? Yeah. And if you get tough, I'll just have to turn you over to your old man right now, savvy? Now that's my whole plot in a nutshell. A simple story for simple people. Now if you behave yourself, I'll see that you get to King Wesley. If not, I'll just have to spill the beans to Papa. Now which of these beds do you prefer? This one? All right.
While he speaks, he has taken an extra blanket from the cot and hung it over the clothesline. This manages to divide the room in half. A close view at the door shows Ellie watching him with interest.
That, I suppose, makes everything quite all right.
Oh, this? I like privacy when I retire. I'm very delicate in that respect. Prying eyes annoy me. Behold the walls of Jericho. Maybe not as thick as the ones that Joshua blew down with his trumpet, but a lot safer. You see, I have no trumpet. Now, just to show you my heart's in the right place, I'll give you my best pair of pajamas.
He flings them over to her, and she catches them and throws them on her cot. Throughout the scene, she hasn't budged from the door, but Peter now prepares to undress.
Do you mind joining the Israelites?
You're not really serious about this, are you?
All right, don't join the Israelites. Perhaps you're interested in how a man undresses. Funny thing about that, quite a study in psychology. No two men do it alike.
A close view of Ellie shows her standing stubbornly.
I once knew a chap who kept his hat on until he was completely undressed and made a comical picture. Years later, his secret came out. He wore a toupee. Now I have an idiosyncrasy all my own. You'll notice my coat came first, then the tie, then the shirt. Now, according to Hoyle, the pants should come next, but that's where I'm different. I go for the shoes first, and after that, I...
Smart Alec.
And thoroughly exasperated, she goes behind the blanket and plops on the cot. She sits on the edge, debating what to do, feeling herself trapped. Her impulse is to leave, if only to show this smart Alec he's not dealing with a child. And she rises impetuously and moves it to the window. A close view at the window shows her looking out. The downpour has not abated one bit, and the heavy raindrops clatter against the window pane in a sort of challenge to Ellie, whose jaw drops. She turns slowly back to the room, and as she does so, her eyes light on the cot. It looks most inviting. After all, she hasn't had any rest for 2 nights. She falls on the cot again, and her shoulders sag wearily. Following this, the view reveals both sides of the blanket. Peter is already in his pajamas.
Still with me, Brat? Don't be a sucker. A night's rest will do you a lot of good. Besides, you've got nothing to worry about. The walls of Jericho will protect you from the big bad wolf.
You haven't gotten trumpet by any chance, have you?
Not even a mouth organ. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? The big bad wolf, the big bad wolf. She's afraid of the big bad wolf. Tra la 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 la.
Ellie smiles and wearily she pulls her hat off her head. She sits this way a moment, thoughtfully, then determined she looks up.
Do you mind putting out the light?
Not at all.
The room is thrown into darkness, except for a stream of light coming in the window from the night light outside the camp. Visible are Peter's face and arms as he stares ceilingward, while Ellie's side, as we can see her in her silhouette, except for such times as she gets in direct line with the window. There are glimpses of her as she moves around in the process of undressing, and we see, or rather sense, her dress dropping to the floor. She now stands in her chemise. These being this being white silk, it stands out more prominently against the darkness. She picks up the pajamas and backs into a corner, following which a close-up of her head and shoulders throw her glancing apprehensively toward Peter's side of the room, and holding the pajamas in front of her with one hand, with the other, she slips the strap off her shoulders. She flings her slip over the blanket. Peter, on his side of the room, looks toward the blanket and reacts to the slip coming into sight. Then the undergarments join the slip on the blanket.
Do you mind taking those things off the walls of Jericho? It's tough enough as it is.
Oh, excuse me.
Ellie's side of the room appears, showing her crawling quickly into bed, pulling the covers overhead, and glancing apprehensively in Peter's direction, following which a close view shows Peter being very conscious of her proximity. The situation is delicate and dangerous. The room is a tingle with sex. He turns his gaze toward the blanket. The view moves to the blanket, remaining on it a moment. It is a frail barrier. The view then moves back to Peter, whose eyes are still on the blanket, his face expressionless. A close view of Ellie next shows that she too has her eyes glued to the blanket. A little fearfully, she turns her head and gazes at the ceiling for a moment. Then suddenly her eyes widen and she sits up abruptly.
Oh, by the way, what's your name?
What's that?
Who are you?
Who, me? Why, I'm the whippoorwill that cries in the night. I'm the soft morning breeze that caresses your lovely face.
You got a name, haven't you?
Yeah, I got a name. Peter Warren.
Peter Warren. I don't like it.
Don't let it bother you. You're giving it back to me in the morning.
Pleased to meet you, Mr. Warren.
Pleasure is all mine. You know, I've been thinking about you.
Yes.
You had a pretty tough break at that. Twice a missus and still unkissed.
Ellie doesn't like that implication and glares in his direction as Peter's voice continues.
I'll bet you're in an awful hurry to get back to New York, aren't you?
Good night, Mr. Warren.
Good night.
He also turns his head towards the wall and the scene fades out. A long view of the sky in the early morning fades in. In the dim distance, there is a speck, which, as it comes nearer, turns out to be an airplane. The drone of its motors become louder and louder. Then the view cuts to the control cockpit of the plane, revealing two pilots.
The old man's screwy.
What's that?
I said the old man's screwy.
Yeah.
The dame's too smart for him.
How'd you like to be married to a wildcat like that?
That'd be nice.
The first pilot grimaces in disgust and grabs his nose between his fingers and goes through the motion of ducking underwater. As they both laugh, the scene cuts to the cabin of the plane, a privately built plane which has all the equipment of a passenger ship. Andrews and one of his secretaries, a conservative-appearing man of middle age, lean over a table. This being a closed cabin, the roar of the motors scarcely interferes with the dialogue.
Here's another wire, sir. This one's from Charleston. Checking every northbound train. Also assigned 20 operatives to watch main highways. No success yet. We'll continue to do everything possible. Signed, Lovington Detective Agency, Charleston.
Any others?
Yes, sir. There's a report here from every state along the East Coast. Want to hear them?
What do they say?
They're practically all the same, sir.
Amateurs.
They're the finest detective agency in the country, sir.
Andrews doesn't answer. He puffs furiously on his cigar and glances out the window. He snaps up the receiver of the phone and presses a button, following which the scene cuts to the control cockpit, where a light flashes on the instrument board and the pilot picks up the receiver.
Yes, sir.
Thought I made it clear I was in a hurry to get to New York. What are we crawling for?
In the control cockpit, the pilot reacts to the complaint and glances at his speed indicator. We then see the speed indicator registering 180 miles an hour. The pilot looks aghast.
Ooh. We've got her wide open, sir.
Well, step on it. Step on it.
He bangs up the receiver and stares moodily out of the window. It is plain that he is worried. The view then includes his secretary, Henderson.
I hope she's all right, sir.
Of course she's all right. What do you think can happen?
Nothing, sir.
And shut up about it.
Okay.
Thereupon the view cuts to a close-up of an airplane motor in rapid motion, and this dissolves to the auto camp the next morning. A close view showing Ellie peacefully sleeping, but the drone of the plane overhead disturbs her, and she moves restlessly.
Darn planes.
She squirms around uncomfortably and, finding it impossible to resume her slumber, opens her eyes. The sun pouring in through the window causes her to squint. She sits up and stares outside, puzzled. Then, remembering where she is, she looks toward the other side of the cabin, listening for some sign of life. But there is none, and she relaxes. She falls back on the pillow, pulling the covers over her. Now Peter enters from the outside of with an armful of foodstuffs, which he dumps on the table and looks towards Ellie.
Hey, you're not up yet? Come on, come on.
What time is it?
8 o'clock.
Goes to the blanket which hangs between the two cots and throws something over it to Ellie.
Here.
What is it? Why, it's a toothbrush. Thanks. You had it pressed.
Come on, hurry up. Breakfast will be ready in no time.
Why, you sweet thing, you. Where'd you get it pressed?
Listen, Brad, I'm going to count to 10. If you're not out of bed by then, I'm going to yank you out myself.
A close view of Ellie shows her being stubborn but alarmed.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Why, you bully. I believe you would.
6, 7, 8, 9.
I'm out.
She jumps out of bed, throwing the covers around herself, following which Peter is seen going back to the table.
You'll find the showers and things right back of the second cottage.
Outside?
Certainly outside. All the best homes have them outside.
I can't go out like this.
What?
Like this? I have no robe.
Here, take mine.
He flings his robe over to her, and she disappears behind the blanket.
But make it snappy.
Ellie has gone into his robe and appears on his side. The robe is too large for her, and she makes a comical figure. As she enters, she tries to maintain her customary dignity.
Where'd you say the showers and things were?
Hey, you're little, aren't you?
Where's the shower?
Your hair is cute like that. You should never comb it.
I'll find it myself.
And she slams the door viciously, but Peter rushes over to the window to watch her. And as viewed by him, Ellie appears next, walking to the showers outside the cabin. She holds her head high and struggles valiantly to maintain as much dignity as she can muster under the circumstances. Then in the cabin at the window, Peter, watching Ellie, chuckles at her, shaking his head in amusement. He starts toward the table, and the scene cuts to a moving view outside the cabins, which Ellie walking past several cottages on her way to the showers. Several people stop to stare at her until she reaches her destination. There are two wooden shacks adjoining, each having a sign on them. One reads showers men, the other showers women. In the front of the women's shower, there are several unappetizing-looking fat women waiting, and with them is a small girl. Ellie crosses over to the women's shower and disappears inside. The waiting women staring at her, puzzled. A moment elapses, and Ellie backs out, being pushed by a woman, part of whose naked body is visible, and whose voice is heard in protest. Can a body have some privacy around here? The women are waiting at chuckle at Ellie's embarrassment, and she stands aside. They certainly are making a monkey out of her decorum. The little girl, keeping eye on Ellie, is fascinated.
Don't she look funny, Mama?
Ellie, wheeling on the little girl, crushes her with a devastating look so that the little girl cringes against her mother's skirt. Ellie goes to the end of the line to await her turn, following which close-ups show the little girl slowly turning her head to look at Ellie, and Ellie noticing the little girl staring at her. Ellie sticks her tongue out at her, and in a scene which includes both, the little girl retaliates by sticking her tongue out as well. This dissolves to a view of Ellie coming out of the showers. At the same time, Shapley comes out of the men's shower, and upon seeing Ellie, his face lights up.
Hello, sister.
Ellie ignores him and walks toward her cabin, but Shapley falls into step with her.
Sorry about last night. Didn't know you were married to that guy. Should have told me about it right off. Hee 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 hoo hoo. There I was getting myself all primed for a killing, and you turn out to be an old married woman. Wow.
The scene cuts to the door of Peter's cabin as Peter comes out and stands in the doorway, and is surprised to see Ellie and Shapley, who are then seen from his angle talking. Thereupon, Peter is seen again in his lip curls, and as his lip curls a little jealousy, he returns to the cabin, following which we see again Ellie and Shapley walking. He notices the robe she is wearing, and he looks down toward her feet, the view moving down to show Ellie's legs and feet. The pajama legs are seen protruding below the robe, the cuffs of which she has turned up. Then the view moving back up to Ellie and Shapley. He lifts her robe playfully.
Hey, what's this? Wearing Papa's things? Now that's cute. That's what I call real lovey-dovey. Yes, sir.
If you don't get out of here, I'll slap the fresh mouth of yours.
Sorry, I didn't mean to, Ooh.
Get out!
Okay, I was just trying to make conversation. Jeez, whoa.
Ellie leaves abruptly. Cut to the cabin, where Peter is now busy setting the small table. Ellie enters after a moment while Peter has his back to the door.
High time you got back.
I met some very interesting women at the showers. We got to chatting about this and that. Time flies.
She disappears behind the blanket, following which we see Peter's side of the cabin, which Ellie's voice continues from behind the blanket.
We must come back to this place often. You meet the nicest people.
Her head bobs over the blanket now and again as she dresses.
I saw this little Puss in Foos girl. She turned out quite a charming creature. Very outspoken too. Said I looked funny. Wasn't that cute?
Hurry up and get dressed.
Why, Peter? Don't you want to hear about our lovely friends?
You didn't waste so much time on that wisecracking drummer. We'd have been through with breakfast by this time.
A close view shows Ellie in the process of buttoning her dress. She looks up, having recognized a ting of jealousy in his voice, which intrigues her. She starts to the other side of the blanket. Then we see her joining Peter in his part of the cabin.
Well, I hope you're not going to dictate whom I can talk to.
I know a couple of truck drivers I'd like to have you meet sometime. Come on, sit down.
Thank you. My, scrambled eggs.
Egg. 1 egg, donuts, black coffee. That's your ration till lunch. Any complaints?
Nope, no complaints.
I'd have gotten you some cream, but I meant buying a whole pint.
Why, you don't have to apologize, Mr. Warren. You'll never know how much I appreciate all this.
What makes you so disgustingly cheerful this morning?
Must be spring.
I thought maybe Believe You Me told you a couple of snappy stories.
He apologized for last night. Said he didn't know we were married.
Just shows you how wrong a guy can be, don't it?
Thanks. You think this whole business is silly, don't you? I was running away and everything.
No, it's too good a story.
Yes, you do. You think I'm a fool and a spoiled brat. Perhaps I am, although I don't see how I can be. People who are spoiled are accustomed to having their own way. I never have. On the contrary, I've always been told what to do and how to do and where to do with whom. Would you believe it? This is the first time I've ever been alone with a man.
Yeah?
It's a wonder I'm not panic-stricken.
You're doing all right.
Thanks. Nurses, governors, chaperones, even bodyguards. Oh, and it's been a lot of fun.
One consolation, you can never be lonesome.
But it has its moments. It's got to be some sort of game to try it out with father's detectives. I did it once. Actually went shopping with a bodyguard. It was swell. I'm absolutely immortal. But it didn't last long. They caught up with me in a department store. I was so mad, I ran out the back way and I jumped in the first car I saw, and guess who was in it?
Santa Claus.
King Wesley was in it.
Oh, is that how you met him?
We rode all around the afternoon. Father was frantic. By 6 o'clock, he was having all the rivers dragged.
Where did you learn to dunk? In finishing school?
Oh, now don't you start telling me how I shouldn't dunk.
Well, of course you shouldn't. You don't know how to do it. Dunking's an art. Don't let it soak so long. A dip and a plop into your mouth. If you let it soak so long, it'll get soft and fall off. It's all a matter of timing. I had to write a book about it.
Thanks, Professor.
Just goes to show you 20 millions and you don't know how to dunk.
I'd change places with a plumber's daughter any day.
But before he can answer, they are interrupted by voices directly outside their window, and the Mew moves with Peter as he goes to the door, which he opens slightly. Thereupon Dyke is seen in conversation with two men outside the cabin.
You can't go around bothering my tenants. I tell you, there's no girl by that name here. Besides, how do I know you're detectives?
Show me your credentials, Mac. I'll look around.
Peter closes the door and turns to Ellie.
Detectives.
That's Father's at work. What'll I do? Peter, what'll I do?
Don't look at me. I didn't marry King Wesley.
Ellie runs around the room, picking up her stuff and murmuring, "Oh my goodness," she reaches the window.
Maybe I can jump out of the window. Do you think they'll see me?
Come here, you little fool.
She starts towards him. We then see him plunking her in a chair.
Sit down.
He rumples her hair and sticks a few hairpins in her mouth. He now stands aside and deliberately talks loud enough to hear her to be heard outside.
Yeah, I got a letter from Aunt Betty. She says if we don't stop over at Wilkes Bar, she'll never forgive us.
What are you talking about?
At this moment, Peter rushes over to her and clamps his hand over her mouth.
And the
Ellie,
baby is due next month, and they want us to come.
Ellie looks up at him and realizes what he's doing. She nods to him that it's all right, whereupon he removes his hand from her mouth. And now one of the detectives approaches the front door of the cabin. When he hears Peter's voice, he stops to listen.
He says she saw your sister Ethel the other day, and she's looking swell.
The detective knocks on the door. At this, we again see inside of the cabin, and Peter whispers to Ellie to say,
Come in.
Peter rushes behind the hanging blanket as he has his head stuck over it, waiting for the detective to enter. The moment the door opens, Peter ducks. The detective takes a step inside the room.
I hope Aunt Betty has a boy, don't you? She's always wanted a boy. I think we'll stop over in Wilkes Bar this trap, darling. Give the family a treat.
There's a nice man to see you, sweetheart.
Who, me? You want to see me?
What's your name?
Are you addressing me?
Yeah, what's your name?
Hey, wait a minute. You're talking to my wife. You can't walk in here. And what do you want anyway?
We're looking for somebody.
Well, look your head off, but don't come busting in here. This isn't a public park.
As Peter has been speaking, the second detective and Dyke have entered. They walk over to Peter and the first detective and Ellie.
I got a good mind to sock you right in the nose.
Take it easy, son. Take it easy.
What's up?
The second detective's eyes fall on Ellie, and he stops to stare at her suspiciously. He takes a photograph out of his pocket, which he inspects.
These men are detectives, Mr. Warren.
I wouldn't care if they were the whole police department. They can't come in here and start shooting questions at my wife.
Don't get excited, Peter. They're just a civil question.
There you go again. How many times did I tell you to stop butting in when I have an argument?
Well, you don't have to lose your temper.
You don't have to lose your temper. That's what you told me the last time, too, every time I step in to protect you. At the Elks dance when that big Swede made a pass at you.
He didn't make a pass at me. I told you a million times.
The two detectives and Dyke are seen watching the other two, who are now out of sight.
Oh, no, I saw him. He kept pawing you all over the dance floor.
He didn't. You were drunk.
Oh, so now I was drunk.
Well, you were.
I'm sorry I didn't take another sock at him.
Yeah, and got yourself arrested.
Ah, nuts, you're just like your old man. Once a plumber, always a plumber. There isn't an ounce of brains in your whole family.
Peter Ward, you've gone far enough. I don't stand being assaulted like this another minute.
Ellie goes over to her cot and starts picking up her hat and things, whereupon Dyke, very much affected, turns to the detectives.
Now look what you done.
Sorry, Mr. Warren, but you see, we're supposed to check up on everybody.
We're looking for a girl by the name of Ellen Andrews. You know, the daughter of the big Wall Street mug.
Your wife sure looks like her, don't she, Mac?
She sure does.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope you find her. Quit bawling. Quit bawling.
The detectives start out, accompanied by Dyke, who is still concerned about the disturbance of his tenants. As they disappear out the door, we hear Mr. Dyke's voice.
I told you they were a perfectly nice married couple.
Their voices die. Peter stands in the middle of the room, watching them go. From her side, where she has been stalling, Ellie peers out of the window until the detectives vanish. She starts towards Peter. Then they peer together, both staring out until the detectives are well out of sight. Finally, Peter closes the door and turns to her.
It'll be a dirty trick on Aunt Betty if it turns out to be a girl after all.
This brings laughter from both. But Peter suddenly sobers and he looks at her thoughtfully.
Say, you were pretty good jumping in like that. Got a brain, haven't you?
You weren't so bad yourself.
We can start a two-person stock company. If things get tough, we can play some small pen auditoriums. We'll call this one The Great Deception.
Next week, East Lynne.
After that, the Three Musketeers. I'd make a great D'Artagnan.
How about Cinderella or Real Hot Love Story?
Nah, no mushy stuff. I'm running this troupe.
Oh, you are? Who made you the manager?
I did. It was my idea, wasn't it?
You always want to run everything.
If you don't like it, you can resign from the company.
I refuse to resign.
Then I'll fire you. I'll do all the parts myself.
They are interrupted by the door being flung open. Dyke sticks his head in for a moment.
Bus leaves in 5 minutes.
Holy jumping, we haven't even started to pack yet.
And they both scurry around, throwing things carelessly into Peter's suitcase as the scene fades out. Part 6, Gordon's office fades in, and Gordon is at his desk as his secretary enters.
Here's
Here's
another wire from Mr. Warren.
Throw it in the basket. What's it say? Have I got a story? It's getting hotter and hotter. Hope you're the same.
Gordon snatches the wire out of the secretary's hand and tears it viciously into bits.
Collect?
Yes.
Don't accept anymore.
The scene dissolves to Andrew's New York office, a richly appointed place, awe-inspiring in its dignified furnishings, which shriek of wealth. Andrews paces back and forth in the back of his desk. Sitting before him is a man of 50, with very rugged features. He is Lovington, head of the detective agency bearing his name. When the scene opens, Andrews is holding forth.
3 days. 3 whole days. And what have you accomplished?
We can't do the impossible, Mr. Andrews.
What I'm asking isn't impossible. My daughter is somewhere between here and Miami. I want her found.
I'll put extra men on all along the way.
It's not enough. Are you certain she's not with King Wesley?
No, he's been trailed 24 hours a day since the thing started. He can't even get a phone call we don't know about.
I'm worried, Lovington. After all, something might have happened to her.
Yes, sir.
Oh, Clark, want you to arrange for a radio broadcast right away. Coast-to-coast hookup. Offer a reward of $10,000 for any information leading to her whereabouts.
Yes, sir.
Brown,
Yes, sir.
send the story out to the newspapers. Some of the out-of-town papers may not have a picture of her. Here, wire this to them. I want it to break away right away.
As he hands a picture to Brown, the view moves into a close-up of the picture, which dissolves to a close-up of the same picture in a newspaper. And as the view draws slowly back, we see headlines over it, which read, "Daughter of Banker Disappears, $10,000 Reward." The view then draws back to reveal Shapley reading the newspaper. He stares long and absorbingly at the picture. Then slowly he turns his head toward the rear of the bus, and the view, following his gaze, passes a group of men singing "The Man on the Flying Trapeze." They are huddled together and accompanied by a man who plays a guitar. Then the view continues moving until it reaches Peter and Ellie, who join in the song, and a close-up of Ellie shows her eyes sparkling as she sings gaily. Shapley looks back at Ellie and apparently comes to the conclusion that his suspicions are correct, for he quickly folds the newspaper, casting a surreptitious glance around to make certain he is not being watched. A diabolical smirk spreads over his face. A full view of the interior of the bus shows most of the occupants joining in the fun. Singing, they seem unmindfully about the discomfiture caused by the rocking of the bus, which throws them against each other. Then the view draws into a front seat in which sits a woman and a small boy of 10. The woman's face is haggard and she sways uncertainly, her eyes half closed. Her small son's frightened face peers up at her. The little boy says to his mother in a trembling voice.
What's the matter, Mom? Don't you feel all right?
The woman struggles valiantly to recover her composure. She presses her son's small hand in a feeble effort at assurance. A close view of Ellie and Peter shows Ellie singing more boisterously than the rest, doing the comical song with exaggerated gestures, but suddenly her face clouds at something she sees.
Peter, there's something the matter with that woman. She looks ill.
We see the woman. Her head rolls weakly. A pained expression is on her face.
I better go over and see her.
Don't be silly. Nothing you can do. Must be tough on an old woman a trip like this.
Yes.
We see the other passengers around Ellie and Peter enjoying themselves. One of them pokes her.
Hey, Gally Kersey, come on, get on it. Get on to it. You too, McCormack.
Ellie and Peter snap into it, and they are just in time for the long wail which precedes the chorus.
Oh, he flies through the air with the greatest of ease, this daring young man on the flying trapeze.
You're going to be ready for a musical before you know it, George. At this, the scene cuts to the road. The bus is caught in a muddy road, full of ruts, and at the moment wavers, dangerously at an angle. The left front wheel is stuck in a deep hole, and the engine roars and clatters as the driver feeds the gas. Finally, the bus moves forward, extricating the wheel. But just as it does, the right front wheel falls into another mud hole on the other side. There's a close-up of the right wheel, showing it revolving desperately in vain. The mud splashes in all directions. The wheel seems to sink deeper and deeper. Thereupon, this view cuts to the inside of the bus. The bus is tilted over at an extreme angle, which has thrown Ellie into a corner of the floor, where she crouches in an undignified position. She looks like a turtle, her head being invisible.
Thank the man for me, Peter. This is the first comfortable position I've had all night.
Peter, amused, is assisting her to her feet. The guitarist has continued his playing uninterrupted, and as Peter lifts Ellie, he sings.
She flies through the air with the greatest of ease, this daring young maid on the flying trapeze. Her movements are graceful, all men does she please.
A close view of the woman and the little boy now shows the latter terrifiedly watching his mother, whose head sags wearily. Finally, she topples forward in a swoon.
Mom, what's the matter with you? Somebody help me. Something's happening to her.
The music stops abruptly. Everyone looks up, startled. Ellie starts forward, followed by Peter. Passengers closely grip around the woman and chatter. She's fainted. Look how pale she is.
Get some water, somebody. Let me get in here, son.
Ellie goes out of sight to get water. The boy cries audibly, terror-stricken, but gets out of Peter's way, and Peter lifts the woman up and stretches her across the seat. Ellie comes back with water, which she silently hands to Peter, who administers to the woman, and when she slowly opens her eyes, makes her drink the water. The woman looks around, bewildered.
That's better. You're all right now. Just took a little nosedive, that's all.
He assists her in sitting up. The boy's wailing his head, wailing is heard, and he now rushes over and throws his arm around his mother.
Why, Mom? Why, man?
His mother clings to him, but still feeling faint, her head sways. Peter looks up at Ellie and gives her a sign to sit down beside the woman. Ellie sits down beside her. Peter takes the boys by the shoulders.
Come on, son. Better give your mother a chance to snap out of it. It's all right, son. She'll be okay in a couple of minutes.
He leads the boy away while Ellie places her arm around the woman.
You better rest. It's been a hard trip, hasn't it?
The scene cuts to a close view of Shapley, who has his eye peeled on Peter, watching him, and we next see Peter and the boy, who is still sobbing quietly. They are now standing away from the other passengers.
We ain't nothing since yesterday.
What happened to your money?
Ma spent it all for the tickets. She didn't know it was going to be so much. We shouldn't have come. I guess, but Mom said that there's a job waiting for her in New York, and if we didn't go, she might lose it.
Going without food is bad business, son. Why didn't you ask somebody?
I was going to do it, but Ma wouldn't let me. She was ashamed, I guess.
Peter reaches into his pocket for a bill just as Ellie approaches them.
She'll be all right. Soon she'll get something to eat.
Peter has extracted a single bill and dips in his pocket for a smaller one. Before he can find anything, however, Ellie takes the one he has in his hand and gives it to the boy.
Here, boy. First town we come to, buy some food.
I should have ought to take this. Mom will be angry.
Just don't tell her anything about it. You don't want her to get sick again, do you?
No, but I should ought to take the money. You might need it.
Me, forget it, son. I got millions.
Thanks.
Come on, let's go back to your mother.
She leaves with the boy, Peter watching her a moment, impressed by her display of humaneness, before turning and leaving the scene, following which a close-up shot of Shapley watching Peter, then also rising and staring out. On the road, the driver is now standing in front of the mud hole, staring at the sunken wheel dolefully, as several people stray into the scene.
That storm should have made a mess out of these roads.
Holy smokes, you'll never get out yourself. Better phone for some help.
Phone for help. We're right in the middle of nowhere. There isn't a town within 10 miles of here.
Shapley is just entering the outskirts of the group. He stops and looks in the direction of Peter speculatively. He has the newspaper stuck in his pocket, which he caresses tenderly. The scene expanding. Peter is then seen leaving the group.
What's up?
Looks like we're going to be stuck for a long time.
Say, buddy, like to have a look at my paper?
He has taken it out and has it opened as he hands it to Peter. The headlines concerning Ellie and her picture shriek out at Peter. This startles him for a moment, but he manages to recover his poise.
Traveling like this, you kind of lose the track of what's going on in the world.
Thanks.
If you want to get anywhere nowadays, you got to keep in touch with all the news. It is what I always say.
That's right.
Take the story there, for instance. Be kind of sweet if we could collect that 10,000 smackers.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
It's a lot of dough if I was to run across that dame. You know what I do?
What?
I'd go 50-50 with you.
Why?
Because I'm a guy that don't believe in hogging it, see? A bird that figures out that way winds up behind the 8 ball is what I always say.
What's on your mind?
5 G's or so, I crab the works.
You're a pretty shrewd baby. We better get away from this gang, talk this thing over privately.
And the view moves with them as Peter leads the way toward a clump of bushes off the side of the road, Shapley following. They are concealed from the rest of the passengers.
Lucky thing my running into you. Just the man I need.
You're not making any mistake, believe you me.
I can use a smart guy like you.
Say, listen to me. When you're talking to old man Shapley, you're talking to...
You pack a gat?
Huh?
A gat. A gat. You got any fireworks on you?
Why, no,
That's all right. I got a couple of machine guns in my suitcase. I'll let you have one of them.
Shapley is beginning to realize he is in for something he hadn't bargained for, and stares speechlessly at Peter, who continues blandly.
You better expect a little trouble up north. May have to shoot it out with cops.
The perspiration starts appearing on Shapley's brow. As we see him in close-up, Peter's voice continues.
If you come through all right, your 5 Gs are in the bag, maybe more. I'll talk to the killer, see that he takes care of you.
The killer?
Yeah, the big boy, the boss of the outfit.
You're not kidnapping her, are you?
Well, what else, stupid? You don't think we're after that penny ante reward, do you? 10,000 bucks, chicken feed. We're holding her for 1 million smackers.
Say, look, I didn't know it was anything like this. See, and
Oh, what's the matter with you? Getting yellow?
But I'm a married man. I got a couple of kids. I can't get mixed up with all this. I can't get it.
Stop pedal, you mug, before I... What are you trying to do? Tell the whole world about it? Now listen, you're in this thing and you're staying, and get me, you know too much.
I won't say anything, honest. I won't, I swear.
Yeah, how do I know? I got a good mind to plug you. I shouldn't take any chances on you.
You can trust me, mister. I'll keep my mouth shut.
Yeah? What's your name?
Oscar Shapley.
Where do you live?
Orange, New Jersey.
Got a couple of kids, huh?
Yeah, just babies.
You love them, don't you?
Oh, gee, mister, you wouldn't ain't thinking about
Keep your trap shut, all right?
Sure. I'll keep my trap shut. You can depend on me, mister.
If you don't, ever hear of Bugs Dooley?
No.
Nice guy, just like you, but he made a big mistake one day. He got kind of talkative. Know what happened? His kid was found at the bottom of the river, a rock tied around his neck. Poor Bugs. He couldn't take it, blew his brains out.
Gee, that must have been terrible. I guess he had it coming to him though, but don't worry. Don't worry you about me. I don't talk. I never talk. Take my word for it. Gee, I wouldn't want anything to happen to my kids.
Okay, just remember that now. Beat it.
Oh, thanks, mister. Thanks, man. I always knew you were kind of hearted.
Come on, scram, and stay away from that bus.
Sure, anything you say.
As he says this, he backs away from Peter, following which a close-up of Peter shows a twinkle in his eye, and then, as seen by Peter, Shapley appears walking hurriedly away. When he thinks the distance is safe, he starts running. He slips and falls in the mud, picks himself up, and continues his race for life. The scene dissolves to the road at night, with Ellie and Peter walking along. It is apparent that they have been trudging like this for a long time.
Poor old Shapley. You shouldn't have frightened him like that.
At the rate he started, he's probably passed 2 state lines by this time. The exercise is good for him.
Yes, I noticed he was getting a little fat lately. Ouch.
What's the matter?
I was never built for these moonlight strolls. Why did we have to leave the bus?
I don't trust that chatterbox.
As the scene dissolves to the banks of a narrow stream at the night, Peter is bending over, removing his shoes, and we see the two closer as they talk.
First town we hit in the morning, you better wire your father.
Not as long as I'm alive.
Okay with me if you can stand the starvation diet.
What do you mean starvation?
It takes money to buy food.
Why haven't you?
Not a soul. I had some before the fainting scene.
You didn't give that boy all your money.
I didn't give him anything. You were the big-hearted gal. How about wiring your father now?
Never. I'll get to New York, even if I have to starve all the way.
Must be some strange power Wesley has over you women. How do you expect to get there?
To New York?
Yeah.
I'm following you.
Aren't you afraid of me?
No.
Okay. Hang on to these.
As he bends down in front of Ellie, he gets a firm grip around her legs and throws her over his shoulder like a sack. She squeals, terrified, but Peter ignores this, and with his right hand, which is free, he lifts the suitcase and starts walking across the stream. Ellie's first fright is gone, and she now rather enjoys the sensation of being carried by Peter. She lets herself go completely limp, still clinging to his shoes, which she carries by the string. As they walk, they dangle. Dangling shoes keep hitting Peter's backside.
I wish you'd stop being playful.
Sorry. It's the first time I've ever been piggyback in years.
This isn't piggyback.
Of course it is.
You're crazy.
Oh, I remember distinctly Father taking me for a piggyback ride.
And he carried you like this, I suppose.
Yes.
Your father didn't know beans about piggyback riding.
My uncle's brother had 4 children, and I've seen them ride piggyback.
I don't think there's a piggyback rider in your whole family. I never knew a rich man yet who was a good piggyback rider.
That's silly.
To be a piggybacker, it takes complete relaxation, a warm heart, and a loving nature.
You're prejudiced. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I jumped. And rich people have none of those qualifications, I suppose.
No, not a one.
You're prejudiced.
Show me a good piggyback rider, and I'll show you somebody that's human. Take Abraham Lincoln, for instance, a natural piggybacker. Where do you get off with your stuffed shirt family? Why, your father knew so much about piggyback riding that he...
In his excitement, he wheels around to speak to her, forgetting that as he turns, she goes with him. Not finding her at his right, he swings around to his left. Naturally, he takes Ellie with him, and realizing his mistake, he mutters.
Ah, nuts.
He proceeds on his way, walking faster than before. They continue this way silently for some time. Finally, Ellie breaks the silence.
My father was a great piggybacker.
Peter raises his eyes heavenward in thorough disgust, then calmly hands his suitcase to her.
Hold this a minute.
Ellie takes the suitcase from him, and his hand is now free. He delivers a resounding smack on her backside, so that Ellie lets out a yelp.
Thank you.
I love this movie so much. The scene dissolves to the edge of a cow pasture at night, and Ellie and Peter are revealed climbing under a barbed wire fence, following which the scene dissolves to a haystack in front. Peter sets his bag down and surveys the layout. Ellie is watching him.
This looks like the best spot.
We're not going to sleep out here, are we?
I don't know about you, but I'm going to give a fairly good imitation of it.
He busies himself laying out a bed for her, pulling away from the stack and spreading it out on the ground. Ellie wanders aimlessly and then moves to a rock, where she sits and watches Peter.
Peter,
What?
I'm hungry.
Just your imagination.
No, it isn't. I'm hungry and I'm scared.
You can't be hungry and scared at the same time.
Well, I am.
If you're scared, it scares the hunger out of you.
Not if you're more hungry than scared.
All right, you win. Let's forget it.
I can't forget it. I'm still hungry.
Holy smokes, why'd I ever get mixed up with you?
This brings silence, and he goes on building a bed for her. Then a close-up of Ellie shows her watching him. Her eyes soften. A very deferent interest in him is slowly but surely blossoming, and the fact that he is marking her bed adds to the intimacy of the scene. A close view of Peter shows him concentrating on his task, but he pauses a moment and turns to glance at her. It is a devouring look, which he quickly dispels by working more fervently on her bed.
If I had any sense, I'd have been in New York by this time. Taking a married woman back to her husband. What a prize sucker I turned out to be. Come on, your bed's all ready.
She watches him a moment, then rising slowly, started toward Peter. And she stands over her bed, surveying it speculatively.
I'll get my clothes all wrinkled.
Well, take them off.
What?
All right, don't take them off. Do whatever you please, but shut up about it.
She flashes him a petulant, offended glance, but it is lost on Peter, who has his back to her, and meticulously she slips to her knees and proceeds to stretch out on the hay. The hay bed is bumpy and hard, and she has quite a difficult time getting comfortable. Her efforts to do so are accompanied by painful sighs. A close view shows Peter stopping to watch her, and his look is very sympathetic and solicitous. Then, while Ellie groans and sighs and pounds the hay with her palm, Peter steps out of sight. Ellie is unaware of his departure, so busily occupied is she with her makeshift bedding. She squirms around unhappily and finally stretches out, deciding to make the best of it. She lies on her back, her hands clasped under her head, looking up at the stars.
You're becoming terribly disagreeable lately. Snap my head off every time I open my mouth. If being with me is so distasteful to you, you can leave. You can leave anytime you see fit. Nobody's keeping you here. I can get along.
She waits a second, then turns to see what effect this has on him. The fact that Peter is gone doesn't quite register at first. She looks around calmly, then is puzzled, and finally she becomes panicky. She sits up with a start.
Peter? Peter!
Real terror comes into her face, and she's ready to cry. She gets to her feet.
Peter!
He comes running into the scene under his arm with a wholesome, and he has a watermelon.
What's the matter?
Oh, Peter.
What's cutting into you?
Oh, Peter, I was so scared.
I wasn't gone more than a minute. I just went out to find you something to eat.
I know, but
Here, eat your head off.
I don't want it now.
I thought you were hungry.
But
What?
so scared that it's scared.
Oh, holy jumping catfish. You can drive a guy crazy.
He kicks the melon viciously out of sight, and without any particular preparation or fuss, he flops down on his bed, following which Ellie goes to her bed and lies down too. Then a close view of Ellie appears, and at the moment she looks far removed from the spoiled, pampered, self-reliant brat of Alexander Andrews. Instead, she is a helpless baby clinging to Peter's protective wing. She'd be ever so grateful right now for a little civility on his part, for a little tenderness and understanding, and she glances over at him hopefully. Peter, however, stares up at the stars dreamily, and we then see Ellie turning away from him, disappointed. Still, the minute Ellie turns her head, Peter looks at her out of the corner of his eye, and it's a long, steady gaze. Then suddenly he gets an idea and rises. He finds his top coat and goes to her.
Might get chilly later on. Better use this.
As he bends down to tuck her in, their faces are seen in close proximity. Ellie, tremulous and fearful, has her eyes peeled on him. The situation is imminent with danger. Anything is likely to happen at this moment, and she is frightened and expectant. She knows how weak would be if he suddenly crushed her in his arms. Peter avoids his gaze. He too is a bit shaky. The temptation is there, and his resistance is waning. He tucks her in and quickly turns away. Ellie's eyes, however, never leave him. Immediate danger has vanished, and it leaves her a little regretful. A close view of Peter as he walks over to a rock and sits down shows him nervously taking out a cigarette and lighting it.
You've had a lot of men crazy about you, haven't you?
Ellie doesn't respond. She has the scrutinizing, speculative look of a girl who feels herself falling in love with someone who is practically a stranger to her, as a result of which she is frightened. Then a wider view includes both of them, as we see that Peter too fights valiantly against a mounting interest in this girl, who epitomizes everything he dislikes. He creates the impression in the following scene that in his analysis of her, he is trying to dissuade himself from something he is bound to regret. His attack on her, consequently, is overly vicious.
I guess you've pretty much had your own way with them. That's your trouble mostly. You've always had your own way. That's why you're such a mess now.
He pauses a second, waiting for a protest, but Ellie offers none. She's too much absorbed in her own confusing emotions. A close view then shows Peter taking a long puff on his cigarette and exhaling the smoke, watching it vanish before he speaks.
You know what generally happens to people like you? You get your values all mixed up. You attach all the importance to the wrong things. Right now, for instance, there's only one thought in your mind. You get back to King Wesley.
He awaits reaction, but a close view shows Ellie absorbed. She remains silent.
The comical part of it isn't what you want at all. In a couple of weeks, you'll be looking for the nearest exit. The people like you spend all your life on a merry-go-round. I guess that's what makes you so dizzy. You're always chasing after something, at least you think you are. Truth is, you're just running away from yourself mostly because you're miserable. You hate yourself. The world's full of people like you, don't know what they want.
Do you know?
Sure,
What?
nothing. Nothing you give 2 cents for.
Try me.
I just want to be let alone, that's all. Life's swell if you don't try to too hard. Most people want to get a stranglehold on it. They're not living, they're just feverish. If they didn't get themselves all balled up with a lot of manufactured values, they'd find what they want, peace and calm. When you get right down to it, what's all the shooting for, will you tell me? After all, you can only eat 3 meals a day, only sleep in one bed. I mean, right now that hay feels pretty good to you, doesn't it? Sure it does, because you were tired and it's the only thing around.
You sound like a hobo.
I am. I only work when I have to. 2 years ago, I got a notion and went to China. There was a war going on. Swell. After a while, I got stale. I went down to Tahiti. Just lay on the beach for 6 months. What could be sweeter?
Doesn't sound very exciting.
Well, I guess not. I had given odds it would mean anything to you. Now, there were moments when I had hopes, I'm wasting time. You're destined to be a dope the rest of your life. I pity you. Good night.
Turns over with a finality that precludes any further discussion, following which close-up of Ellie reveals that her eyes are wide open, staring thoughtfully up at the sky. The scene fades out slowly. Anybody need a break?
Sure.
Yeah, all right, let's come
Maybe just
back.
like 5 minutes. Is that
Yeah,
cool?
let's come back at 8:30.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
BRB. Jeremy, I love you.
And you.
What's that?
Buddy.
Wow, what a story.
It's so
What a
good.
story.
Two kids are falling mad. Lee. In love.
In
What a concept for a movie. Sorry.
I agree.
The
It's almost like
old movie snob in me comes out once in a while.
it's so similar to Roman Holiday.
Right?
Which one was first?
This was first. This was one of the first, like, I don't think there would have been a Roman Holiday or a Sabrina or the Meg Ryan stuff. I think it started with this, is my belief.
Weird.
There would be no Nora Ephron.
no.
My friend got me a shirt that a sweatshirt that for my birthday, and it says a film by Nora Ephron. That's the shirt.
That's awesome.
That's
That's
great.
amazing.
I wore it today.
Nice.
Could have kept it on for the picture.
Yeah. I saw this Elaine May thing at the New Beverly a while back, and there was shirts that said like written and directed by Elaine May. It's cool.
The New Beverly is going to start programming in April.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Fun.
we all need to go.
Oh, yes.
Love the New Beverly.
The New Beverly and the New Art are the only ones I've heard opening up. I don't think the Arrow hasn't opened up yet. I don't think the Vista has anything yet, but
I haven't
Was
gotten
it
this
the
long.
Egyptian that Netflix bought, right?
the Egyptian is the one that Netflix bought. That's not going to be open for like another year.
Interesting.
Having movie theater withdrawal.
Same.
I went to one movie after COVID. I went down to Orange County to watch Tenet. That was it.
Yeah, I almost did that. I thought about it. But
Did
I
you guys see that picture of Christopher Nolan,
I did.
like at the movie theater?
I did.
He was in Burbank, supposedly. Yeah.
He met the Egyptian.
And
He believes in going to the movies. Alrighty, shall we resume?
yeah.
All right. All right, welcome back. You guys are doing so amazing.
You too, Jack. Thank you.
Part 7, A Road Fades In. It is day now, and Peter and Ellie are trudging along. Ellie limps and wears an unhappy expression on her face.
What are you thinking about?
By a strange coincidence, I was thinking of you.
Really?
Yeah, I was just wondering what makes dames like you so dizzy.
What do you say we're supposed to be doing?
Hitchhiking.
Well, you've given me a good example of hiking. Where does the hitchhiking come in?
A little early yet. No cars out yet.
She spies a rock and heads for it. Then we see her seated on the rock.
If it's just the same to you, we'll sit right here till they come. Got a toothpick?
No, but I've got a penknife.
Hay in my teeth.
She points to her front teeth, and Peter flicks the hay out of her teeth.
There it is. Better swallow it. We're not going to have any breakfast.
Needed rub it in. What are you eating?
Carrots.
Raw?
Uh-huh. Want one?
No. It's a wonder you couldn't get me something I can eat.
You don't think I'm going around panhandling for you. Best thing in the world for you, carrots. Had a tough time getting them. If that farmer ever caught me, good night.
I hate the horde stuff.
While she speaks, a car roars up by at a terrific speed. Peter and Ellie both jump up.
I wish you wouldn't talk too much. We let a car get away.
What if nobody stops for us?
They'll stop all right. It's a matter of knowing how to hail them.
You're an expert, I suppose.
Expert. Gonna write a book on it called The Hitchhiker's Hail.
There's no end to your accomplishments.
You think it's simple, huh?
Oh, no.
Well, it is simple. It's all in the thumb. See, a lot of people do it like this. But they're all wrong. Never get anywhere.
Tis. I'm sorry for the poor things.
The thumb always works. Different ways to do it, though. Depends on how you feel. For instance, number 1 is a short, jerky movement. That shows independence. You don't care if they stop or not because you got some money in your pocket, see?
Clever.
Number 2 is a wider movement. A smile goes with that one, like this. That means you got a couple of brand new stories about the farmer's daughter.
You figured that out all by yourself, huh?
Oh, that's nothing. Now take number 3, for instance. That's a pip. It's the pathetic one. When you're broke and hungry and everything looks black, it's a long movement like this with a follow through.
Amazing.
Hmm? Yeah, but it's no good if you haven't got a long face with it.
Here comes a car.
Now watch me. I'm going to use number 1. Keep your eye on that thumb, baby, and see what happens.
Peter steps forward into the road and does his thumb movement. The car approaches, but speeds right by, spreading a cloud of dust into Peter's face, leaving him staring at the departing car, nonplussed. Thereupon Ellie glances up at him, a satirical expression on her face.
I'm still watching the thumb.
Something must have gone wrong. I guess I'll try number 2.
When you get up to 100, wake me up.
Another car is heard coming, and Peter steps forward, prepared to hail it. Then this dissolves to a long view of the road as he screams as a stream of cars of every description speeds forward and vanish. The view into the side of the road, Peter is seen still in the same spot. He waves his arms, jerks his thumb, indulges in all sorts of gyrations, while Ellie remains slumped on her rock, completely worn out. Now Ellie watches Peter out of the corner of her eye, her face expressionless. Peter continues, his arm waving, but slows down like a mechanical toy which has run out. He finally gets down to just thumbing his nose at the passing vehicles, and then, thoroughly wearied, he flops down on a rock near Ellie.
I guess maybe I won't write that book after all.
Yes, but look at all the fun you had. Mind if I try?
Ew, don't make me laugh.
You're such a smart Alec. Nobody can do anything but you. I'll show you how to stop a car, and I won't use my thumb.
The scene widens as she rises and steps forward.
What are you going to do?
Mind your own business.
She lifts her skirt to above her knees and pretends to be fixing her garter. Her very attractive leg is in full display. Almost instantly, we hear the screaming and grinding of quickly applied brakes, and Peter looks up astonished. The scene wiping off, we then get a closer view of Ellie and Peter sitting in the back of an open Ford. It is a broken down, rickety affair of the 1920s vintage. Ellie grins victoriously up at Peter, who stares ahead of him glumly.
You might give me a little credit.
What for?
I prove once and for all that the limb is mightier than the thumb.
Why didn't you take all your clothes off? You could have stopped 40 cars.
We don't need 40 cars.
Peter glares at her and Ellie's eyes twinkle mischievously, following which we get a wider view, which includes the driver of the car. Danker. He is a man of about 30, a heavy-set, loose-chinned person. At the moment, he is singing an aria from some opera. He suddenly stops, turning to Ellie and Peter in the back seat.
So you've just been married, huh? Well, that's pretty good. If I was young, that's the way I'd be spending my honeymoon hitchhiking. Yes, sir.
And for no reason except that he cued himself into it, he bursts forth into song gustily.
Hiking down the highway of love on a honeymoon. Hitchhiking down, the highway down.
Ellie and Peter in the back of the car react to the noise Danker makes.
Hey, aren't you afraid you'll burn out a tonsil?
Tonsil? Me? No. Me burn a tonsil? My tonsil won't burn, as life's concerned. I
All right, let it go.
turn.
The scene dissolves to the front of a lunch wagon on a deserted road, and Danker's car drives into the scene and stops. Then we see Danker turning to Ellie and Peter.
How about a bite to eat?
Why, I think that would be...
No, thanks. We're not hungry.
Oh, I see. Young people in love are never hungry.
No.
Young people in love are very seldom hungry. People in love are very seldom hungry.
When he is out of sight, Peter glares at Ellie.
What were you going to do? Gold dig him for a meal?
Why not? I'm hungry.
Eat a carrot.
Never. I'm going in and ask him.
You do, I'll break your neck.
She looks up at his glowering face, realizes he means it, and wilts under his dominant gaze.
Let's get out and stretch our legs.
Peter gets out, followed by Ellie, and they walk away from the car. Both are silent. At the door of the lunch wagon, then Danker comes out and looks around furtively. Ellie and Peter, as seen by him, appear walking away, following which the view moves over to the Ford and drops down to a close-up of Peter's suitcase. Now Danker looks about quickly and starts toward his car. He springs into the car, steps on the starter, and is off. Ellie and Peter hear the motor. They wheel around, and their eyes widen in surprise.
Hey,
He flings his coat out at Ellie and dashes after the Ford. He is then seen running after it when the car turns around bend in the road. Peter continues the pursuit. This scene wiping off, the Ford now makes its appearance around the bend, and as it approaches, Peter is seen at the wheel. He looks while he's just been through a fight, and as Peter rides in, Ellie comes running toward him.
Oh, Peter, what happened? Are you all right?
come on, get in.
Oh, you hurt. There's a cut on.
Come on, come on.
What happened?
Just a road thief. Picks people up and runs off with their stuff. What a racket.
What do you give him for the car?
A black eye.
A close view shows Peter and Ellie driving along in the Ford. Peter looks ahead uncommunicatively. Ellie glances up at him, and it is plain that something is on her mind.
Look, how are the carrots holding out? Any left?
Peter glances at her. He knows what a concession this is on her part, and he smiles sympathetically.
You don't have to eat the carrots. I just passed a pond with some ducks in it.
Darling.
She reaches up and kisses his cheek, and Peter beams happily.
Oh, we haven't much gas left in this thing. I got to start promoting some. Better take the things out of the pocket of that coat. Ought to be good for 10 gallons.
The scene fades out. Fade into Andrew's study. According to a close view of King Wesley, he answers every description we have had of him. He is a stiff, handsome, stuffed shirt gigolo. He sits in a chair, leaning on a cane, his gloves loosely in his hand. The view then moves back to reveal Andrews, who from the opening of the scene is speaking as he paces around the room.
I haven't changed my mind, Wesley. I want you to understand that. I don't like you. I never have. I never will. That's clear enough, isn't it?
You made that quite evident with all your threats of annulment. Well, it hasn't bothered me for a minute. Ellie and I got married because we loved each other, and she's proving it. As far as I'm concerned, there's going to be no annulment.
You've got a good thing, and you're hanging on to it, huh? All right, you win. I'll just have to get used to you. I admit, I'm licked, but only because I'm worried. I've had detectives all over the country searching for her. I've seen thousands of photographers, fortune tellers. Nuts! Every crank in the country has written me. Haven't slept one night this week. If I don't find her, I'll go crazy.
Might have been able to help if it weren't for you. I've been watched so closely.
Yes, I know. Well, you can help now. I issued a statement yesterday that I've withdrawn my objections, begging her to come home. I haven't heard from her. Apparently, she doesn't trust me.
Why shouldn't she? After all, she's...
All right, that's why I sent for you. There's a room full of reporters out there. I want you to make a statement that you've had a talk with me, that we've reached an understanding, that if Ellen comes home, I won't interfere with your marriage. Will you do that?
If you really mean it, I will.
Of course I mean it. I don't care whom she's married to, as long as I can get her back. Come in, boys. This is this is King Wesley. He has a statement to make.
Hello, Wesley. How do you do?
The scene dissolves to the side of a lonely road at night. First, there is a close-up of a newspaper headline, which reads, Andrews withdraws objection. Magnate and aviator reconciled. Everything all right. Come home, darling, says Wesley. Then the view draws back, revealing that the newspaper is in the hands of Ellie, who sits in the car alone, gazing at the headlines. Then Peter's voice is heard.
All right, Brett.
The sound of his voice, she is startled, and she quickly folds the paper and throws it out of the bag. She starts to get out of the car.
Any luck?
Yeah, he finally agreed to let us have a room.
What about money?
Talked him out of it. He thinks we're going to stay a week. I'll have to think of something before morning.
That's swell.
I'm glad you think so. If you ask me, it's foolish. I told you there's no sense in our staying here tonight. We can make New York in less than 3 hours.
I could arrive in New York at 3 a.m. Everyone's in bed.
Okay. Cottage number 3.
As they start toward it, the scene cuts to the owner's cabin. The owner of the auto camp and his wife are standing at the window looking out. She is a hatchet-faced shrew. He is meek and docile.
There you go, trusting people again. How many times did I tell you?
He looked like an upright young feller to me, Ma.
Yeah, they're all upright till they walk out on you.
Said he was gonna stay weak.
Maybe.
Worst comes to the worst, we got his car for security.
I don't trust him.
The scene cuts to the inside of a cabin, not unlike the previous auto camp cabin in which Peter and Ellie spent a night. Peter's open suitcase is on a chair, over which he leans. Ellie walks around puffing at a cigarette.
Well, here we are on the last lap.
Ellie crosses to the window and stares out moodily. Peter removes several things from his suitcase and lays them on the bed. There is a strained silence between them as both are lost in their own thoughts. A close view of Peter as he putters abstractedly with the contents of his bag and creates the impression that he empties it tonight rather ruefully. It somehow spells finesse to their adventure.
Tomorrow morning, you'll be in the arms of your husband.
Ellie turns away from the window and looks at Peter. She stares this way for a long moment before speaking.
Yes, you'll have a great story, won't you?
Yes, well.
Peter takes the rope out of his bag. It is the one used for the walls of Jericho previously. He lays it aside and then, remembering, retrieves it. For a moment he holds it in his hand speculatively, then turning, proceeds to tack it up. The noise of the tacking attracts Ellie's attention, and Ellie, again seen close, turns and looks towards Peter.
Is that the walls of Jericho going up?
Yep, the walls of Jericho.
Peter stretches the rope across the room and tacks it to the other side.
Well, you certainly outsmarted your father. I guess you ought to be happy.
There's no response from her, a close view revealing that she quite obviously isn't happy. They are now separated by the blanket, and Peter gets her pajamas from his suitcase and throws them over the blanket.
Thank you. Am I going to see you in New York?
Nope.
Why not?
Peter glances at the walls of Jericho and, after a speculative pause,
I don't make it a policy to run around with married women.
a close-up of Ellie, disclosing only her neck and shoulders, shows her slipping out of her clothes. She pauses and looks up.
No harm in your coming to see us.
Not interested.
Won't I ever see you again?
What do you want to see me for? I've served my purpose. I brought you back to King Wesley, didn't I? That's what you wanted, wasn't it?
Ellie is already in bed and staring at the ceiling.
Peter, have you ever been in love?
I probably did the world a great favor at that. Got 2 pinheads out of circulation. You know, Cupid thinks he's doing something when he brings 2 lovers together. What good's that? I'm bringing 2 pains in the neck together. I think I'll start an institution, hang out a shingle.
The view now widens to include both sides of the blanket. Ellie doesn't hear a word of Peter's attack. She's too intent on her own thoughts.
Have you ever wanted to fall in love?
Me?
Yes. Haven't you thought about it at all? Seems to me you could make some girl wonderfully happy.
Maybe. Sure, I've thought about it. Who hasn't? If I ever met the right sort of girl, yeah, but where are you going to find her? Somebody that's real, somebody that's alive. They don't come that way anymore. I've never been sucker enough to make plans. You know, I saw an island once in the Pacific. Never been able to forget it. That's where I'd like to take her. But she'd have to be the sort of a girl that jump in the surf with me on moonlit nights and love as much as I did. You know, those nights when you and the moon and the water all become one, when something comes over you and you feel that you're part of something big and marvelous. Those are the only places to live, where the stars are so close over your head that you feel you could reach right up and stir them around.
A close-up of Ellie at this point shows that she is affected by his stirring description of a heaven from which she is excluded, as she listens to him continuing.
Certainly I've been thinking about it. Boy, if I could ever find a girl who's hungry for those things.
Peter has disposed of a cigarette and stares dreamily heavenward.
I'm going to swim in the surf with her. I'm going to reach up and grab stars for her. I'm going to laugh with her and cry with her. I'm going to kiss her wet lips and...
Suddenly stopping, he turns his head slowly, sensing Ellie's nearness, and the view drawing back includes Ellie. It shows her standing at his bedside, looking down at him yearningly. Then we see them close together. Peter's face is immobile, and Ellie drops to her knees.
Take me with you, Peter. Take me to your island. I want to do all those things you talked about.
Peter stares at her lovely face. His heart cries out with an impulse to crush her in his arms.
Better go back to your bed.
I love you.
You're forgetting you're married.
I don't care. I love you. Nothing else matters. We can run away. Everything will take care of itself. Please, Peter, you can't go out my life now. I couldn't live without you. Oh, Peter.
Sobbing, she lays her head on his breast and throws her arms around him. All is quiet for a moment as Ellie's head rests on his breast, while Peter struggles with an overwhelming urge to pour out his heart to her.
Better go back to your bed.
There's a lengthy pause. Neither of them stirs. Then Ellie slowly raises her tear-stained face and gets to her feet.
I'm sorry.
She turns and disappears behind the blanket. Peter remains motionless. Then a close view shows Ellie as she gets into bed, sobbing quietly. She hides her face in the pillow to suppress her sobs. It is the first time in her life that she has been so deeply hurt. A close view next shows Peter reaching over for another cigarette, which he lights. All his movements are thoughtful, meditative. He leans back and stares at the ceiling until we see only the cigarette in his mouth as it emits slowly rising puffs of smoke. This dissolving the cigarette is seen to be burnt 3/4 down, a long, frail ash hanging perilously on. Peter is then seen as he removes the cigarette from his mouth and crushes it into a tray. He leans back on the pillow and for a moment he is quiet. Then glancing over in Ellie's direction, he calls to her.
Hey, Brett. Did you mean that? Would you really go? Hey, Brett.
He listens. All is quiet. He slips his covers off and crosses to the blanket and peers over it. She is asleep. Her tear-stained face rests on the pillow. Her arm extends over her head. It is a childlike posture. Peter is watching her tenderly. He speculates whether to awaken her and decides against it. He starts away. Peter tiptoes around the room for a few moments, deep in thought. Then an idea, which has been turning over in his head, begins to take form. He hastily begins dressing. The scene dissolving, Peter is seen completely clothed and starting for the door. When he thinks of something, he turns back, grabs his suitcase, and stops to throw a kiss to Ellie, and goes out into the night. Thereupon the scene wipes off, disclosing a gas station along the road at night. Here, Peter is talking to a gas station attendant.
All I'm asking is enough gas to get me to New York. The bag's worth $25.
Yeah, but I got a bag my wife gave me one for Christmas.
Listen, man, I'll tell you what I'll do. When I come back in the morning, I'll buy it back from you and I'll give you $10 profit. What do you say?
Ain't got a hat.
What?
I ain't got a hat.
Well, you got one now. Come on, fill her up.
While he is still talking, the scene dissolves to a view of Peter driving furiously, a broad, happy grin on his face, following which several scenes wipe off in succession. Scenes of Peter driving at high speed, causing several cows to amble out of the way, the car driving into the Holland Tunnel and of the back room of a speakeasy where Peter stands in front of a small desk upon which there is a typewriter. Near him is a swarthy Italian.
Fine, that's fine, Tony. Now get me a drink and make sure nobody disturbs me for half an hour.
Bene, Pete.
As Peter plants himself in front of the machine, the scene dissolves to a close-up of the typewriter carriage, upon which are typed the words, "And that's the full and exclusive story of Ellen Andrews. Adventures on the road. As soon as her marriage to Queen Wesley is annulled, she and Peter Warren, famous newspaperman, and undoubtedly the most promising young novelist of the present era, will be married." The view drawing back, Peter rereads the last sentence, smiles contentedly, and as he yanks out at the sheet, the scene wipes off, disclosing the outside of Gordon's office. The sign on the door reading, "Office Mr. Gordon." Gordon's secretary is at her desk as Peter breezes in.
Hello, Agnes.
Better not go in, he'll shoot you on sight.
I haven't been shot at for days.
In Gordon's office, Gordon is at his desk. He looks up when Peter enters.
Get out of here.
Now, wait a minute, Gordon.
Get out.
Peter reaches aside and grabs him by the arms.
Joe, listen.
Don't Joe me.
Okay, Joe, listen. You know I've always liked you. Anytime I could do you a great turn, anytime I ran into a story that looked good, I always came running to you, didn't I? Well, I got one now. Those wires I sent you were on the level. It's the biggest scoop of the year. I'm giving it to you, Joe.
You mean about the Andrews kid?
That's it. I got it all written up, ready to go. All I want is $1,000.
Upon hearing this, Gordon is ready to jump out of his skin.
$1,000. Get out of this office before I throw you out bodily.
Don't get sore, Joe. This is something you got to do for me. I need $1,000 and I need it quick. I'm in a jam.
What's the $1,000 for?
To tear down the walls of Jericho.
What?
Never mind. Listen, suppose I should tell you that Ellen Andrews is going to have her marriage annulled.
Huh?
That she's going to marry somebody else.
You're drunk.
Would an exclusive story like that be worth $1,000 to you?
If it's on the level.
Well, I got it, Joe.
Who's she gonna marry?
It's all right here. Give me the 1,000 and it's yours.
I wouldn't trust you as far as I could throw that desk.
Now, wait a minute, Joe. Use your bean. I couldn't afford to hand you a phony yarn like that. I'd be crazy. There isn't a newspaper in the country that'd give me a job after that. I could go to jail.
I'd put you there myself.
Sure, I wouldn't blame you either.
Who's the guy she's gonna marry?
I am, Joe.
You?
Yeah.
Now I know you're drunk. I'm going home. Don't annoy me anymore.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, Joe, stop being an editor for just a minute. We've been friends for a long time, haven't we? You ought to know when I'm serious, this is on the level. I met her on a bus coming from Miami. I've been with her every minute. I'm in love with her, Joe.
Well, I'll be...
Listen, pal, you got to get this money for me now. Minutes count. She's waiting for me in an auto camp outside of Philadelphia. I got to get right back. You see, she doesn't know I'm gone. A guy can't propose to a girl without a cent in the world, can he?
What a story. On her way to join her husband, Ellie Andrews falls in love with... Let me see that a minute.
He moves to his desk excitedly, and Peter, a gleam of hope in his eyes, joins him, following which the scene cuts to the shack of the camp owner and wife in the early morning. The owner is suddenly startled out of his sleep by the voice of his wife calling, "Zeke! Zeke!" He looks up just as she rushes into the room.
I told you, you couldn't trust him, he's gone.
Who?
That feller last night, that's who. He's gonna stay a week, huh? Well, he skipped. Took the car with him, too. We wouldn't have known a thing about it until morning if I hadn't took that magnesia. Ah, come on, get up. Don't lay there. Let's do something about it.
Thereupon the scene cuts to the auto camp cabin, affording a close view of Ellie tossing restlessly in her sleep. Suddenly, there is a loud banging on the door, and Ellie, startled, awakens. The pounding continuing, Ellie looks around frightened. The door suddenly bursts open, and the owner and wife enter. They both glance over at Peter's side.
See that? They're gone.
Looks like it, don't it? Here's the woman, Ma.
Oh.
In a close view of Ellie's bed as the owner and his wife come up to her.
What's the matter? Where's your husband, young lady?
Husband?
Yes, if he's your husband.
Isn't he here?
No, he ain't. And the car's gone, too.
Well, he'll be back.
Yeah? What makes you think so? He took a suitcase and everything. Kinda surprised, huh? It's just like I told you, Zeke. They ain't married at all.
There's a close view of Ellie as the wife's voice continues uninterruptedly.
Could tell she was a hussy just from the looks of her.
Ellie is lost in thought, trying to adjust herself to the idea of Peter's leaving her like this. She scarcely hears what is being said.
Hey, you got any money?
Why no?
You'll have to get.
Yeah, you'll have to get...
Why you can't put me out in the middle of the...
Serves you right. Ought to be careful who you take up with on the road. You can't go plying your trade in my camp.
But can't you wait until morning?
You got a minute.
Not a minute.
Ain't gonna wait a minute. Better start getting into your clothes.
Yeah.
Zeke, get.
Yes, Ma.
As Zeke leaves, the wife plunks herself in a chair, grimly determined to wait until Ellie gets dressed and out.
Can I use your telephone? I want to talk to New York.
You ain't gonna stick me for no phone calls. You can go down to the sheriff's office.
The scene thereupon cuts to the exterior of the auto cabin as Ellie emerges, the wife standing in the doorway. In the foreground, several people are scattered around the courtyard. One woman washes stockings under a pump. A man is changing the tire of his car. Ellie comes down the steps and crosses the courtyard.
And listen, next time better keep away from here. I run a respectable place.
Ellie doesn't turn but walks straight forward, trying to maintain her poise. The people in the courtyard turn to stare at her, and one of them snickers. The scene dissolves to Gordon's office as Peter is pocketing the money. Gordon is fondling the story.
Thanks, pal. You saved my life.
Okay, Pete.
He drops the story on the desk and escorts Peter out. His arms are around his shoulder.
You're still the best newspaper man in the business.
They reach the door, which Peter opens. Then they appear at the doorway. Through the open door, the secretary stares dumbfounded at their friendliness.
So long, kid, and good luck.
Outside Gordon's office, Peter kisses the secretary as he passes through.
Goodbye, Agnes. You're beautiful. All women are beautiful.
Oh boy, what a yarn. What a yarn. Get me Hank on the phone. Got to hold up in the morning edition.
While he speaks, he dashes back to his desk. We then see him in the office.
There's Hank.
Hank, listen. Hold the morning edition. Break down the front page. You can have a completely new layout. Send a couple of rewrite men in here. Don't do a thing. I got a story that'll keep your hair curl.
During his speech, his other phone has been ringing persistently. He has ignored it until now and picks up the receiver.
Yeah, don't annoy me. I'm busy. Listen, Hank, dig out all the Andrews pictures. Go Healy out of the bed. I want a cartoon right away with King Wesley in it. He's waiting at the church. Big tears streaming down his face. His bride hasn't shown up. Old man Andrews is there too, laughing his head off. Everything exaggerated. You know now. Snap into it. Yeah, what is it?
A close view of Gordon as he listens shows his eyes widening with amazement.
What, Alan Andrews? You're crazy.
This cuts to a telephone booth where a reporter is seen speaking excitedly.
Yeah, she just phoned her father from an auto camp to come and get her. He's getting a police escort. Wesley's going along too. She's been traveling by bus. The moment she read that her father and Wesley made up, she phoned in.
Back in Gordon's office, Gordon is still at the phone.
You sure that's right? So you haven't been drinking, have you? Okay, grab a car and stay with them. Put Hank on, Angie's. Get me a doctor about to have a nervous breakdown. Hank, forget everything I just told you. I just want to have having a nightmare. Call up the police department. Tell them, find Peter Warren, send out a general alarm. I want the dirty crook pinched.
He picks up Peter's story and flings it viciously into the wastebasket.
Yes, sir. You want us?
Yeah, shove everything off the front page. Ellen Andrews just phoned her father. She's coming home. The moment she heard the old man withdrew his objections, she gave herself up. Spread it all over the place. Here's your lead. Love triumphant. Step on it.
Yes, sir.
Gordon goes to his desk, mumbling to himself. His eye lights on the wastebasket containing Peter's story, and he is about to kick it when he stops. He stares at it thoughtfully, reaches down, lifts it out, and runs through it hastily, and then stares into space, deep in thought. The scene dissolves to an open road in the morning as Peter flies over it in his Ford. He beams happily. He passes a gasoline truck and waves cheerily to the driver. This dissolves to a close-up of an auto siren, accompanied by a prolonged wail, then to a road that morning as 4 motorcycles, 2 abreast, speed forward, followed by a luxurious limousine, which in turn is trailed by a car filled with reporters. Next in the limousine, Andrews is seen in the back seat. He's accompanied by King Wesley, Henderson Lovington, and a police inspector.
I knew she was safe.
Certainly gave us a run for our money.
Can't you get them to go any faster? This dissolves to a deserted road. Peter at the wheel of his car. His high spirits find expression in his efforts to sing.
I found $1 million baby.
He is interrupted by the song of a meadowlark, whistling in a strange melody. Peter listens to it a second time, then answers its call by imitating it. The meadowlark whistles again, and Peter is highly amused.
Okay, pal, be seeing you.
Just then, the sound of sirens is heard in the distance. Peter glances back, and as the sirens come nearer, he pulls over to the side of the road. There follows a full view of the road, with Peter in the foreground at the side as the police cavalcade whizzes by, accompanied by the shrieking sirens. Thereupon, Peter gets an idea.
Come on, Dobbin, old boy, we got a police escort.
He applies the gas and shoots out of sight, following which a full view of the road shows Peter's car trying to catch up with the parade. It outdistances him, however, and we see Peter in the Ford pressing his body forward to help the car make time. His foot pushes the accelerator down to the floor, but the police cars are now out of sight, and Peter has given up.
Dobbin, me lad, you failed me. I'm afraid you're getting old.
Thereupon, the scene dissolves to a small town road where, at the door of a sheriff's office, a policeman is standing on guard. The reporters hang around in front of him. Several yokels look on. The limousine and motorcycles are at the curb, and now, in a closer view at the door, the policeman on guard steps aside at the door and opens, and Ellie, her father, and King Wesley emerge. King has his arm around her. The moment they appear in the doorway, cameras click and several reporters surround them.
Will you make a statement, Miss Andrews? Hold on. Was it an exciting experience? How did you travel?
Later, boys, later. See you at home.
They cross the sidewalk to the waiting limousine as cameras click. The scene dissolves to a road, with Peter still driving. He is, however, as before, in excellent form, and is singing lustily. Suddenly, however, his eyes widen. As he pulls on his brake, the car screeches and moans and comes to a stop.
Take it easy, Dobbin. Remember your blood pressure.
We find Peter directly in front of a slow-moving freight train. Several hobos stick their heads out of a car, and Peter waves to them. The hobos look puzzled for a minute and then wave back. The view then swings over to an opening between the cars, affording a flash of the police parade on the other side, apparently on its way back. Peter amuses himself by talking to an old flagman.
Better get that toy train out of here. I'm in a hurry.
The flagman grins at him in reply, but this time the last car is in sight, and Peter gets all set to move. He stops, however, to wave to a couple of brakemen on the rear platform. In the meantime, the motorcycles have started forward. The sirens begin their low, moaning wail. Peter, attracted, turns, and over Peter's shoulder, we see the parade starting. As the limousine passes, we get a glimpse of the inside. Ellie is lying back on King Wesley's shoulder. He has his arm around her as they pass out of sight. Thereupon, a close view of Peter shows him reacting to what he has seen. He turns his head quickly to stare at the disappearing car, a look of astonishment and bewilderment in his eyes. Slowly, he turns his head forward, staring ahead of him blankly. He can't quite make it out. Then gradually, the significance of it all strikes him, and his mouth curls up bitterly. The scene wiping off a series of newspaper headlines come into view. Ellen Andrews returning home. Marriage halted by father to be resumed. Ellen Andrews, an aviator, to have church wedding. Love triumphs again. Parental objection removed. Cannot thwart love, says father and Ellen Andrews. Glad to be home, says Ellen. This dissolves to the anteroom of a newspaper office. The place is alive with activity, and copies of newspapers are lying around, bearing headlines relating to the Andrews story. Peter, a bewildered, stunned expression on his face, enters and crosses funerally toward Gordon's office. Several people are standing around and looking up.
Hey, Pete, did you see this? Ellen Andrews is back. Gonna marry that Wesley guy after all. What a dame. What a dame.
Peter pays no attention to any of this. He reaches Gordon's door, which is open. He walks directly past Agnes and enters the office. She looks up at him puzzled. Then in Gordon's office, Peter walks to Gordon's desk and lays the roll of bills on it. Agnes enters, watching him anxiously.
Gordon's out back someplace.
See that he gets that way, Agnes. Tell him I was just kidding.
As Agnes stares after him puzzled, Gordon dashes in from a back door.
You can't get a thing done around here unless...
Peter Warren was just in.
Huh? What?
Left this money, said to tell you he was just kidding.
Where is he?
The scene cuts to the outer office and corridor as seen over Gordon's shoulder. Through the open door, Peter is seen walking out. Gordon hurries after him.
Hey, Pete.
Oh, hey, Joe. Sorry, just a little gag of mine. Thought I'd have some fun with you.
Yeah, sure. Had me going for a while.
Wouldn't have made a bad story, would it?
Great, but that's the way things go. You think you got swell yarn, then something comes up along, messes up the finish, and there you are.
Yeah, where am I?
When you're sober up, come in and see me.
Thanks, Joe.
He leaves, Gordon watching him sympathetically, and the scene fades out. The lawn of the Andrews estate fade in. It is morning at the moment of the place, and the place is a beehive with activity. Dozens of butlers and maids hustle around, setting tables. Floral decorations are being hung by men on ladders. In the background on a platform, a 20-piece orchestra is getting ready, accompanied by the scrapping of chairs, adjusting of music stands, unpacking of instruments. The scene cuts to Andrew's study. King Wesley is seated, and Andrews walks around him. They are both dressed in striped trousers, frock coat, etc.
Well, here we are. It's all set. You're finally going to get married properly. With all the fanfare and everything. I still don't know how it happened, but you're going to be my son-in-law. Whether I like it or not. I guess you're pleased.
Why, naturally,
Naturally. Naturally. You're going to become a partner in a big institution. It's one of the largest in the world.
You talk as if...
Someday, perhaps, you might even take charge.
Closer to the edge shows him looking around his study despairingly.
The thought of it makes me shudder.
You might be surprised.
I hope so. However, that'll take care of itself. There's another responsibility you're taking on. One that I'm really concerned about.
What's that?
My daughter.
Ellie? Oh, she's no responsibility.
No? Say, listen, I've devoted a whole lifetime trying to tame that wildcat. Toughest job I've ever tackled. Ever hear of J.P. Clarkson? Biggest man in the country, isn't he? Well, I tamed him. Got him eating out of the palm of my hand. I've browbeaten financiers, statesmen, foreign ministers, some of the most powerful people in the world, but I've never been able to do a thing with her. She's been too much for me. I'm glad you think it's easy. Now listen, if you'll do what I tell you, perhaps I might develop a little respect for you. You never can tell.
What would you like to have me do?
Soccer.
A close view of King shows him looking up, surprised, as Andrew's voice continues.
Soccer at least once a day. Do it on general principles. Make her know you're the boss and never let her forget it. Think you can do that?
It's quite an assignment.
Try. Do me a favor. Try. It's your only chance. And hers, too. Do that for me and maybe we'll be friends. Maybe. Do we understand each other?
Yes, sir.
Fine. I'll see you at the reception.
He withdraws his hand, which he looks at disgustedly, and the results of a jellyfish handshake.
Oh, by the way, Mr. Andrews, I thought of a great stunt for the reception. I'm going to land on the lawn in an audio gyro. What do you think of that?
You thought that up all by yourself, huh?
Well, it'll make all the front pages a spectacular thing like that.
Personally, I think it's stupid. But go ahead, have a good time, as long as Ellie doesn't mind. Doesn't object.
Oh no, she'll be crazy about it. We'll see you later. I'm going out on the lawn and arrange for landing space. Goodbye.
We've done that already.
Yes, of course.
He turns and leaves, Andrews watching him go, shaking his head sadly.
Auto gyro. I hope he breaks his legs.
Andrews starts out. The scene cuts to the hallway as Andrews enters from the study. A maid is coming down the stairs and he calls to her.
Oh, Mary?
Yes, sir?
How is she?
Why, she's all right, sir.
What's the matter? Anything wrong?
Oh, no, sir. No different than...
Yes, I know. Still in the dumps, huh?
Yes, sir. If you'll excuse me. Sir, she sent me for a drink.
Andrew stands a moment thoughtfully and then starts up the stairs, following which the scene dissolves to the upstairs corridor in front of Ellie's door. Andrews enters and knocks several times, receiving no response. He gingerly opens the door. He senses that something is wrong. The next Andrews enters Ellie's bedroom. The view swings around the room, following his gaze. It focuses on Ellie, who reclines on a sofa in her bridal outfit, her head resting on the back. She stares moodily and unhappily at the ceiling. The view then expanding to include both father and daughter. Andrew is seen staring at her a moment sympathetically.
Ellie?
Oh, hello, Dad.
I knocked several times.
Sorry, must have been daydreaming.
Well, everything's set, creating quite a furor too. Great stunt kings going to pull.
Stunt?
Landing on the lawn in an auto gyro.
Oh, yeah, I heard.
Yes, personally, I think it's silly too.
As he continues talking, the view moves with Ellie, who wanders over to the window overlooking the lawn, staring out, lost in thought.
You look lovely. Are you pleased with the gown? Ellie,
Huh? Oh, the gown. Yeah, it's beautiful.
what's the matter, Ellie? What's wrong?
Nothing.
You've been acting so strangely since you returned. I'm worried. I haven't bothered to ask you any questions. Isn't all this what you wanted? You haven't changed your mind about King, have you?
Oh no.
If you have, it isn't too late. You know you know how I feel about him. But I want to make you happy. You gave me such a scare. When I couldn't find you. You know the old pump isn't what it used to be.
Sorry, Dad. I wouldn't hurt you for the world. You know that.
She moves away from him and sits on the sofa. As Andrews watches her a moment and crosses over to her, he sits beside her and places his arm affectionately around his daughter's shoulder.
Ellie, what is it? Aren't you happy, child?
She finally breaks and impulsively buries her face on his breast.
I thought so. I knew there was something on your mind. There.
They remain thus quietly for some time. Finally, Andrews breaks his silence.
What is it, darling? You haven't fallen in love with somebody else, have you?
As this brings an audible sob from Ellie, Andrews lifts up her chin.
Have you?
Ellie rises and walks miserably away from him, dabbing her eyes. Andrews, watching her, realizes he has hit upon the truth. He walks over to her.
I haven't seen you cry since you were a baby. This must be serious. Where'd you meet him?
On the road.
Now don't tell me you fell in love with a bus driver.
No.
Who is he?
I don't know very much about him, except that I love him.
Well, if that's as serious as all that, we'll move heaven and earth too.
He'll do no good. He despises me.
Oh, come now.
He despises everything I stand for. He thinks I'm spoiled and pampered and selfish and thoroughly insincere.
Ridiculous.
He doesn't think so much of you either.
Well,
He blames you for everything that's wrong about me. Thinks you raised me stupidly.
a fine man to fall in love with.
He's marvelous.
Well, what are we going to do about it? Where is he?
I don't know.
I'd like to have a talk with him.
It's no use, Dad. I practically threw myself at him.
Well, under the circumstances, don't you think we ought to call this thing off?
No, I'll go through with it.
But that's silly, child. Seeing how you feel, why would you do such a thing?
It doesn't matter. I don't want to stir up any more trouble. I've been doing it all my life. I've been such a burden to you, made your life so miserable, and mine's too. I'm tired. Tired of running away in circles. He's right. That's what I've been doing since I can remember.
A close-up of Andrew shows him watching Ellie as her voice continues.
I've got to settle down. It really doesn't matter how or where or with whom.
You've changed, Ellie.
Yeah, I guess I have. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore. I want to get away from all this front page publicity. It suddenly strikes me as being cheap and loathsome. I can't walk out on King now. It'll make us look so ridiculous. Besides, what difference does it make? I'll never see Peter again.
Is that his name?
Yeah, Peter Warren.
She starts to walk away when she is attracted by her father's surprise at the mention of the name.
Peter Warren.
Why? Do you know him?
Oh, no.
You haven't heard from him, have you, Dad?
Why, no. Don't be silly.
Oh, please, Dad.
She has reached into his pocket and extracted a letter, which she hurriedly opens and reads, following which to see a letter in Peter's handwriting. It is addressed to Alexander Andrews, 11 Wall Street. It reads, "Dear Sir, I should like to have a talk with you about a financial matter in connection with your daughter, Peter Warren." Ellie is then seen reading and rereading the note. Her face clouds and then slowly changes to an expression of complete disillusionment.
Looks like that was his only interest in me, the reward.
I'm sorry you read it.
Are you going to see him?
I suppose so.
Certainly, pay him off. He's entitled to it. He did an excellent job, kept me thoroughly entertained. It's worth every penny he gets.
She paces agitatedly. Andrews is watching her silently. He knows what an awful blow to her pride this must be. Mary now enters with a cocktail tray, which she sets on the table.
Thanks, Mary. That's just what I need.
To King, Wesley is on his way.
Fine, fine. Have him come in.
I'll be gone.
Ellie swallows her drink and starts pouring herself another as the king enters.
Well, if it isn't the groom himself. You're just in time, King.
How are you, Ellie? Are you happy?
Happy? Why shouldn't I be happy? I'm getting the handsomest man in captivity. Here you are, King. Let's drink. Let's drink to us. We finally made it, didn't we?
You bet we did.
It's up to you now. I want our life to be full of excitement, King. We'll never let up, will we? Never a dull moment. We'll go on, merry-go-round, and never get off. Promise you'll never let me get off. It's the only way to live, isn't it? No time to think. We don't want to stop to think, do we? Let's just keep going.
Whatever you say, darling.
I heard about your stunt. That's swell, King. Just think of it. The groom lands on the lawn with a plane. It's a perfect beginning for a life we're going to lead. It sets just the right tempo. Come on, King. You're lagging.
And I lost my place. In Andrew's study, Andrews is walking around the room, perceptibly affected by his visit with Ellie. He keeps turning Peter's letter over in his hand, apparently debating in his mind what to do with it. He finally gets an idea and determinedly crosses to the phone. Then the scene cuts to a hotel room. First, there's a close-up of a newspaper bearing the headline reading, "Love Triumphant, Interrupted Romance of Ellen Andrews and King Wesley Resumed." Below this is a page of pictures, and the view turns to each photograph. The first picture is of Ellie and King at the beach. The title of the picture reads, "Where They Met." The second picture shows them in a cockpit where they romanced. The next picture is of a small frame house with a shingle reading, "Justice of the Peace." Over the photograph is a caption, "Where They Were Married." The next picture is of the Andrews yacht, where she was taken. Finally, the view moves down to the bottom of the page to a picture of Ellie and King with her father between them in front of a sheriff's office. Caption reads, "Where Love Triumphed." Over these pictures, the phone bell has been ringing, and now Peter is seen staring expressionless at the newspaper. Suddenly, he becomes conscious of the phone ringing. He looks up and goes to it.
Hello. Yes. Who? Oh, why can't I see you at your office?
The scene cuts to Andrew's study, affording a close view of Andrews at the phone.
I leave for Washington tonight. May be gone several weeks. Thought perhaps you'd like to get this thing settled.
This cuts to the hotel room where Peter is at the phone.
Yeah, but I don't like the idea of walking in on your jamboree. Just between you and me, those things give me a stiff pain.
You needn't see anybody. You can come directly to my study. I'd appreciate it very much if you...
No, what the deuce do I want to...
His eyes fall on something, and there follows a close view of a tabloid newspaper reading "Love Triumphant" and containing pictures of Ellie and King. The view then moves down to a feature headline reading, "Groom to Land on Bride's Lawn." King Wesley plans to drop in an auto gyro on the lawn of Andrew's estate. Peter's mouth is screwing up disdainfully.
Yeah, wait a minute. Maybe I will come over. I'd like to get a load of that three-ring circus you're pulling. I want to see what love looks like when it's triumphant. I haven't had a good laugh in a week.
Then the lawn of the Andrews estate dissolves in. It's now filled with guests who wander around chattering gaily. The orchestra plays. A captain of waiters in the foreground instructs his men.
I want everything to be just so when the ceremony starts. You can stand on the side still, no moving around, no talking. Comprende?
The view cuts to a roadway leading to the estate, and Peter is seen driving in his Ford and squeezing in between two Rolls Royces. The uniformed chauffeurs glare at him, but Peter springs nonchalantly out of his car.
Keep your eye on my car when you're backing up, you guys.
As he goes, the chauffeurs look at each other, surprised. The scene dissolves to Andrew's study, where a butler stands in front of Andrews, who is seated at his desk.
Show him in.
The butler leaves, and there's a close view of Andrews reaching over and snapping on a dictograph concealed somewhere on his desk. The office comes into view again. We see Andrews rising and awaiting Peter's entrance. After a moment, Peter comes in, removes his soft felt hat, and tucks it under his arm.
Mr. Warren,
Yeah.
come in, sit down.
Peter advances into the room and looking around curiously. His air is frigid, contemptuous as Andrews studies him, and he makes no move to sit. Andrews waves to a chair and sits down himself. Peter flops into the nearest chair.
I was surprised to get your note. My daughter hadn't told me anything about you, about your helping her.
Yeah, that's typical of your daughter. Takes those things for granted. Why does she think I lugged her all the way from Miami? For the love of it?
Please understand me when I say she didn't tell me anything about it. I mean, not until a little while ago. She thinks you're entitled to anything you can get.
Oh, she does, huh? Isn't that sweet of her? You don't, I suppose.
Don't know. I'd have to see on what you base your claim. I presume you feel you're justified in,
If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I've got it all itemized.
Andrews picks up the paper and glances at it. After a moment, he looks at Peter, studying him interestedly. Then he returns to the paper and reads its contents. Top coat, suitcase, hat, 3 shirts, total $39.60. Andrews looks up from the paper. This is a twist he hadn't anticipated, and he doesn't quite know how to handle it.
I sold some drawers and socks, too. I'm throwing those in.
and this is what you want. $39.60.
Well, why not? I'm not charging you for the time I wasted.
Yes, I know, but
Well, what's the matter? Isn't it cheap enough? A trip like that would cost you $1,000.
let me get this straight. You want this $39.60 in addition to the $10,000.
What 10,000?
The reward.
Who said anything about a reward?
I'm afraid I'm a little confused. You see, I assumed you were coming here for the reward.
Look, all I want is $39.60. If you'll give me a check, I'll get out of this place. It gives me the jitters.
You're a peculiar chap.
We'll go into that some other time.
The average man would go after the reward. All you seem to want is the...
Listen, did anybody ever make a sucker out of you? This is a matter of principle, something you probably wouldn't understand. When somebody takes me for a buggy ride, I don't like the idea of having to pay for the privilege.
You were taking for a buggy ride.
Yeah, with all the trimmings. Now, how about the check? Do I get it?
Certainly.
Indicates that Andrews has been studying Peter throughout the scene. He is now completely won over.
Certainly.
Andrews writes the check, and Peter wanders around the room in an attitude of bitter contempt. Andrews rises and goes to him.
Here you are. Do you mind if I ask you something frankly? Do you love my daughter?
A guy that'd fall in love with your daughter should have his head examined.
That's an evasion.
He grabbed herself a perfect running mate, King Wesley, the pill of the century. What she needs is a guy that'd take a sock at her every day, whether it's coming to her or not.
A close view of the two shows Andrews smiling. Here is a man.
If you had half the brains you're supposed to have, you'd have done it yourself long ago.
Do you love her?
A normal human being couldn't live under the same roof with her without going nuts. She's my idea of nothing.
I asked you a question. Do you love her?
Yes. Don't hold that against me. I'm a little screwy myself.
He snaps the door open and goes out, following which Andrews is seen watching the door, his eyes twinkling, and the scene cuts to the downstairs hallway as Peter comes through, moving on to the front door. But just as he reaches it, Ellie enters, accompanied by half a dozen men and holding a cocktail in her hand. They see each other almost simultaneously and both stop, glaring.
Perfect. Now you look natural.
Ellie leaves her group and comes towards Peter. A close view shows them together, glaring at each other.
I hope you got your money.
You bet I did.
Congratulations.
Same to you.
Why don't you stay and watch the fun? You'll enjoy it immensely.
I would, but I've got a weak stomach.
He wheels around and goes through the door, Ellie looking after him, her eyes blazing. The drone of a plane motor outside is heard, and several people rush down the stairs, all excited. Here comes
the
King.
kid.
Go ahead.
No, after you.
Here comes King.
He's just coming down.
Hurry up, everybody! Come On, Ellie.
Immediately, there's a general excitement as guests hurry through the hallway on the way to the lawn. But Ellen does not move. She remains staring blankly at the door through which Peter went until Andrews enters from his study.
I just had a long talk with him.
I'm not interested.
Now wait a minute, Ellie.
I don't want to hear anything about him.
She walks away from him, and Andrews, frustrated, looks at her helplessly. Thereupon, the scene dissolves to a full view of the lawn. The orchestra is playing Mendelssohn's Wedding March. The lawn is crowded with guests. In the background, we see the autogyro idling. A closer view shows a small platform serving as an altar. Over it, there is an arbor of roses. Back on the altar stands a minister ready. A reverse view reveals a long, narrow, carpeted pathway leading to the house. Both sides are lined with guests who are murmuring excitedly. At the moment, King Wesley and his best man are marching solemnly toward the altar. Back at the altar, we see a high platform upon which are several newsreelmen who are grinding their cameras. The guests, of whom close glimpses are caught on now, peering over each other's shoulders, King and his best man have reached the altar, and the music of the wedding march comes to a stop. The orchestra leader is looking around, apparently waiting for a signal. At the door of the house, a very prissy, middle-aged man waves his handkerchief and nods his head to the orchestra leader. The orchestra leader acknowledges the signal by nodding heads turned to see men waves his baton, and the orchestra starts playing Here Comes the Bride. The guests whisper to each other excitedly. A great deal of stirring takes place. The door of the house slowly opens, and a parade of small flower girls emerge. They march, taking each step carefully while they strew flowers along the path. They are well out of the way when Ellie, on the arm of her father, appears in the doorway. A view of the guests show that they cannot contain themselves. Murmurs of "Here she comes, doesn't she look beautiful?" are heard. The newsreel men are on their platforms behind the altar, bestier themselves. This is what they've been waiting for. Ellie and her father now make their way to the altar. Ellie's face is solemn and her jaw is set.
You're a sucker for going through with this.
Ellie glances at him through the corner of her eye and quickly loosens her, turns forward again.
That guy Warren is okay. He didn't want the reward.
Ellie keeps her eyes glued to the front, remaining expressionless.
All he asked for was $39.60. That's what he spent on you. It was a matter of principle with him. Says you took him for a ride.
This registers on Ellie. She raises her eyes, but her reaction is only slightly perceptible. A close view of a group of guests shows two girls looking enviously in the direction of the bride.
I wish I were in her shoes.
Yeah, sure. She certainly is lucky.
Ellie and her father are seen again, and Andrews is still whispering to her.
He loves you, Ellie. Told me so.
This brings a definite reaction, which she quickly covers up.
You don't want to be married to a mug like Wesley.
At this, there's a close view of Wesley. There is a satisfied smirk on his face.
I can buy him off for a pot of gold, and you can make an old man happy. And you wouldn't do so bad for yourself. If you can change your mind, your car's waiting at the back gate.
Ellie gives no indication of her intentions. Her face remains immobile, and now Ellie and her father have reached the altar. The prissy man is placing them in position. The big moment has arrived. The guests are all a-twitter, but a close view of Ellie shows that she realizes that her fate is closing in on her. She looks around for a means of escape. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and in the face of this company to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony. If any can show just cause why they may not be lawfully joined together, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. King, wilt thou have this woman to be thy wedded wife? So
I will.
both shall live.
I will.
Ellen, wilt thou have this man to be thy wedded husband, so long as ye both shall live? Then, seen at the altar, Ellie makes her decision. She reaches down, takes a firm hold of her train, and, pushing several people aside, runs out of the scene. To those at the altar look up. Surprised and the most startled of all is King himself.
Ellie.
He starts to go after her, but finds Andrews in his way, while the outcries of the guests rise in chorus.
What happened?
Where's it going?
Where's it going?
On the platform, the newsreel men, a look of astonishment on their faces, decide to follow Ellie.
Get him back. She's ducking.
And as viewed by the newsreel men, Ellie is seen in the distance dashing through the gates. The guests stare dumbfounded. Following this, Andrews and King are seen together in the crowd.
What happened?
I haven't the slightest idea.
But his mouth twitches as he tries to keep from smiling. As King runs out of sight, Andrews gets out a cigar and lights it, a happy smile on his face, which he now doesn't try to conceal. Outside the front gate, Ellie is seen in the fast roadster, and she starts away with a plunge. Her eyes sparkle. A crowd of people dash up, headed by King. They stop dead when they see the car disappear. On the lawn, the commotion runs high, and the guests shatter their amazement. A close view of Andrew shows him smiling with satisfaction. The scene dissolves to Andrew's office, where Andrew is regaling himself with a whiskey and soda. He is in a pleasantly inebriated mood when his secretary enters.
Don't want to talk to anybody. Don't want to see anybody.
But it's King Wesley on the phone.
Oh. Hello, my would-be ex-son-in-law. I've sent you a check for 100,000. Yes? That's the smartest thing you've ever did, Wesley. Not to contest that annulment. That's satisfactory, isn't it? Yeah, well, it ought to be. I'm not complaining. It was dirt cheap. Don't fall out of any windows.
There's another wire from Peter, sir. They're in Glen Falls, Michigan.
What's holding up the annulment, you slowpoke? The walls of Jericho are toppling. Send him a telegram right away. Just say, let him topple.
This dissolves to the exterior of an auto camp, very much like the other camps at which Peter and Ellie stayed. The owner's wife is talking to her husband.
Funny couple, ain't they?
Yeah,
If you ask me, I don't believe they're married.
they're married, all right. I just seen the license.
They made me get him a robe and a blanket on a night like this.
Yeah,
What do you reckon that's for?
blamed if I know. Just brung him a trumpet.
A trumpet?
Yeah, you know, one of those toy things they sent me to the store to get it.
But what in the world do they want a trumpet for?
I don't know.
The scene moves to the cabin, occupied presumably by Peter and Ellie. The windows are lighted. There is a blast from a trumpet, and as the lights go out, a blanket is seen dropping to the floor, and the scene fades out. The end. It's so good.
Love.
So good. So good.
Nice.
Well, thank you guys so much. You were amazing. Wonderful movie. Love wins forever. This movie so deserved to win the Best Picture of 1934, and I'm 34. Have a good night.